Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The sun was slowly but surely moving toward zenith. Evelyn felt the hot rays of the sun burning her lower back through the thin cotton fabric of her t-shirt, the skin on her arms and ankles turning crimson. The woman paused for a moment to assess the extent of her defeat. What she saw shocked the woman, and she didn't hold back from commenting. By evening there will be bubbles, and then the skin will go stocking slip. I just went out, and I'm already burned. Like most blondes, Evelyn was afraid of sunbathing. Miracle creams never helped her, so she tried to stay out of the sun on particularly hot days. But to pull out today under the heat, she was forced by her neighbor. To be exact, not Nancy herself, but unwillingness to face her on the plot. She was an elderly woman in the village, disliked by many for her quarrelsome nature. Evelyn also had a bitter experience with her, and now always carefully avoided the neighbor's house. Even to the store for groceries, the young woman took a circuitous route, so as not to inadvertently stumble upon an unpleasant grandmother. For the same reason had to work in the vegetable garden in haste, and the most inopportune time. The nasty neighbor would go out to work on the beds when it was cold, and when the sun began to blaze, she would run away to her ramshackle house. There were different rumors about Nancy's building in the village, sometimes even the most ridiculous, but the landlady always called her dwelling a homestead, which pleased the local jokers. Village humorists amused the people with various pearls, the heroine of which was Nancy. The old woman in her own way perceived not humane attitude of her fellow villagers to her person. Despite her advanced years, the grandmother with youthful enthusiasm took revenge on offenders. In her arsenal were different ways, but most of all the grandmother liked to write complaints with invented facts. Nancy would file a denunciation with a policeman. Do you think Ethan had it all worked out? Ethan who? Well, Tesla. My name may not be known yet, but who knows what will happen in 5 or 10 years? Trying to be calm, Evelyn interrupted the sweet dreams of her loser husband. John, you're as far away from Tesla as you are from the moon. You're a loser or a modern-day loser. Therefore, I'm going to stop subsidizing your ideas completely. And in simple terms, I'm not giving you another dime. So instead of doing this nonsense, you'd better think about your job. I can't keep you on my back forever. This reproach cut painfully on the male ego, and John's polished face immediately distorted with a grimace of hatred. You've decided to kick me around with reproaches. Have you forgotten the shit I pulled you out of? If I hadn't married you 8 years ago, you'd still be in the pigsty. I saved you from slave labor and poverty. Evelyn knew that John was about to blame her for all his failures, so to avoid making matters worse, she went out onto the porch in silence, but her raging husband couldn't stop. You shouldn't do that, Evelyn. You'll regret humiliating me, and you'll regret it more than once when I'm rich. It'll happen, and I'll pass you by. You'll beg me to forgive your callousness, but I won't even look in your direction. So that his expressive monologue would not be drowned in the void, the man also left the house after his wife. Evelyn, you're lost without me. Come to your senses, you wretch. Otherwise, you'll end up in a garbage dump. Noticing that his only listener was getting farther away from the house, John ran after her, but immediately fell into the trench he had dug more than a month ago. Evelyn laughed heartily. You see, John, this is a sign from above. I remember you promised to bring water into the house, then you promised to steward the house, and all your promises are in this hole. You just dug yourself. Evelyn could hear her husband swearing as he climbed out of the grassy trench. She had long since gotten used to his flamboyant performances. Several times she had tried to get away from the scandalized man, but always something stopped her. And in the whole world, she had no one more dear to her than John. Despite his quarrelsome character, her husband never raised a hand on her, and he was not far. In the dense raspberries behind the neighboring fence, a quiet rustling was heard, and after a while Nancy herself appeared. "Good day to you, Evelyn, and good day to you, Nancy." Evelyn regretted that she had not noticed her neighbor in time. Now she would have to listen to the old woman's ramblings for the sake of propriety, but it didn't bother Nancy much that her appearance was not greeted with joy. She shook off from her warm vest plant debris, bloody raspberries, all chipped away, and no one cares, all abandoned. Evelyn was surprised not only by the old woman's inappropriate attire, but also by the eagerness with which she waded through the thorny shrubbery. The woman would hardly have made such a sacrifice for the sake of mere curiosity. Her hunch was at once confirmed. Nancy fixed her handkerchief on her small head, which resembled an unripe pumpkin. "Evelyn, how good it is to see you! There's a matter at hand, and I can't do without you." "I'm listening to you very carefully, Nancy." The thin lips of the old woman smiled, and her voice had an ingratiating tone. Evelyn knew she was about to ask for something. In the 8 years she'd lived with John, she'd learned to be calm about the most unusual requests, but she could tell from the way her neighbor was taking a long time to gather her thoughts that her grandmother was going to make some special demands. Nancy coughed for reassurance. "I'll tell you what, dear neighbor, my grandson, and he's a well-known man in town and almost an oligarch, has decided to revitalize our village." Although Evelyn didn't understand what her grandmother was getting at yet, she supported this initiative in absentia. It was high time to change something in our village. Grandmother was glad to have the support, and my Benjamin, too, thinks it's the right time to renew the village. He wants to build a bunch of stores and a factory to make juice. But first his grandson plans to build himself a 2-story house with an underground garage and parking lot. He told me a lot of things, but I didn't get all the details over the phone. And I'm very happy for you and your grandson. But what do I have to do with his plans? Now, honey, I'll explain everything. Benjamin likes it very much, this very spot where my manor house stands. It's close to the river and a short walk to the store. Well, but what's it got to do with me? Nancy could not bear it, and her peaceful tone changed to an angry one. What's not to understand? Our lots are right next to each other. Benjamin's house is to be built on the site of my estate. I've described everything to him in my will anyway, but my grandson wants to make a small park with a summer tent and fountains. He has 3 kids, and they need a separate place to play and have fun. Benjamin's other plans include Evelyn interrupting a pushy neighbor. "Thank you for sharing your favorite grandson's plans with me, but they don't interest me much. What do you want from me, Nancy?" The neighbor rolled her eyes in surprise. "Why do you pretend to be a silly fish, Evelyn? My grandson's got his sights set on your lot. What's not to understand? The house is registered to you, as far as I know. When Molly died, her mansion and the land passed into your hands? Am I wrong? What of it?" The old woman swung her hand like she was holding a saber. "All right, I can see it's no use talking to you. Benjamin will be here soon, but he'll talk differently. Don't threaten me with Nancy, and tell your Benjamin I'm not going to sell the house. Let him count on your inheritance." The old woman shook her dry fists even harder. "For your malicious character, Evelyn, God will not give you children." The old woman knew how to hurt her uncooperative neighbor. She had hit the sorest spot. Evelyn grabbed a dry twig lying on the floor and threw it at Nancy. "You old hag, go away." The log came down with a whistle somewhere in the bushes, but the young woman realized that she had hit exactly the target. Nancy from afar began to send threats. "I'll file a police report on you. You'll get jail time for self-harm." Evelyn no longer paid attention to the shouts of the old woman. She walked slowly towards the house, trying to answer the main question. "But why is all the misfortune dumped on my head?" At her appearance, John perked up. "Oh, is Evelyn mine? Tired? Do you want me to heat up dinner?" My husband acted as if there'd never been a quarrel this morning. He fussed to the kitchen, reporting on the work done. At first, I wanted to work in the garage, but then I thought I'd clean up the stain on the ceiling. Evelyn looked up. The problem spot was covered by a slanted piece of wallpaper of a completely different shade, but the husband was very pleased with his work. Wasn't that better? The woman was so tired from the noisy morning that she twisted her heart. "Yes, darling," almost imperceptible. The praise emboldened the man, and in his mind immediately activated a fantasy track. "Tomorrow I'll dig a trench, or I'll break my legs. It's unlikely we'll be able to bring water into the house this summer anyway. It's gonna take a lot of money. I will complete my project. I got a patent, and then you and I will live. We will go to the south." John noticed that his wife did not share his joy. "Evelyn, what's wrong? Is your back hurting again?" The woman often complained of lower back pain. Often she couldn't get out of bed for days. Then John treated her with ointments and even gave her injections himself. But now it was obvious that his wife was in a bad mood, not because of her back. "Just now, John, I had a fight with Nancy. The old witch has been ambushing me in her vegetable garden." "What does she want?" "Not her John, but her grandson. Briefly and in general terms, they want our lot in the house." John whistled in surprise, to which Evelyn immediately reacted sharply. "How many times have I told you not to whistle in the house? That's why we're always tight on money." "Oh, come on, all this superstition. Personally, I do not believe in any omens. You better tell me how much they're offering for our house." John looked at his wife with the look of a 5-year-old child who came to the toy store to choose something he liked. "By the way, I shared a desk with Benjamin for 3 years in junior high school. Then his parents moved to the capital. Our locals said that his dad had made it big, and that's the kind of guy who makes money. So it might be something to consider." Evelyn lowered herself gingerly into a chair. "John, are you serious? Or are you joking again?" "What jokes, Evelyn? We're being offered money, and that doesn't happen every day. Think of the prospects. I can finish my project, which in turn will get me a lucrative contract, and then—" "John, why are you always talking about yourself and your plans? This is my home, by the way, and maybe you should ask my opinion about it. And then have you thought about where we're gonna live if we sell the house?" The man looked at his wife with the same childish look. "I'm sorry, I didn't think about it. But we can rent an apartment or part of the house for a while." "All right, John, enough of this nonsense. I'm not selling the house to Benjamin or anyone else. You and your ideas are really going to make me homeless." John remained standing at a loss in the kitchen with a ladle in one hand. The man was trying to understand how he could refuse to accept money that was coming his way. Not a week after the unpleasant conversation with Nancy, the village was blessed with the arrival of Benjamin himself. The entire small population of the village poured out into the street to pay their respects to the iconic personage. Surprisingly, the scene resembled the arrival of royalty in Murom, depicted by the hand of a famous artist, only the place of the Russian empress was occupied by a successful businessman. Benjamin instantly caught the mood of the crowd. He smiled and bowed to the sides. There were, of course, those who looked at it with laughter, but most of them literally devoured their hope with their eyes. "I am glad to see you all, my fellow countrymen. I promised to do everything for the revival of our small homeland. For completeness of the picture, there was not enough candy or money, which by duty could scatter bodyguards. But for gifts, the local oligarch was apparently stingy. However, even without material support, the PR campaign was at a high level. Now everyone in the village was talking about Benjamin's arrival, and Nancy couldn't feel the ground beneath her feet with pride. John decided that he should take the opportunity too, and at dinner he said to his wife, as if by the way, "I think I'd ought to drop in on Benjamin. Maybe he'll remember a schoolmate." Evelyn suddenly supported her husband. "Come in. Maybe he'll at least offer you a job. If a man is planning to build, he'll need specialists. At least you'll be useful." "Of course, Evelyn, I appreciate your opinion, but I'm not a builder. I have a completely different specialty." The man spoke with an obvious challenge, alluding to his engineering degree. But his moment of glory didn't last long, because his wife mercilessly killed the untimely flight of fancy. "Your specialty, John, is sitting on my neck, and I'm tired of it. And you must realize I'm not giving you any more money. You have to start earning your own bread sometime." Another scandal was coming. John had already taken in more air in his lungs to respond with dignity to his wife's perfidy. But at that moment there was a sudden knock at the door. The couple were very surprised to see that Mr. Benjamin himself came to visit them. The owner of the house began to make a fuss about the guest. "Welcome to our hearth. I didn't expect you to think of me, Benjamin, but it's a pleasure." The guest only nodded at the welcoming ritual, but paused. He sat down at the table, which Evelyn was promptly setting, and even drank the cup offered by his host, but that Benjamin traditionally made the first toast to the meeting. The men drank and reached for the pickles, which the hostess put on the table. "Help yourself, dear guest, my mistress makes great pickles." The businessman took another drink. "That's right, John. Only in our village women know how to pickle cucumbers." "Then let's have a drink, because it's uncomfortable to stand on one leg." "Don't think I'm not into this business, but I believe that ancestral traditions should be honored." "I agree, but don't pour me any more." "Hypertension. I don't want to die before my time. I've got a lot of work to do." Benjamin was an excellent speaker. He knew where to pause and where to raise the tone a little. Evelyn had briefly attended an art reading club at school, where they were taught how to speak properly. Now she watched the guest with undisguised interest, realizing that he did not appear to them for the sake of an old friendship with John. But the guest began from afar. "John, how many years has it been since you and I used to go trick-or-treating together at recess?" The landlord began to calculate in his mind. "Nearly 30. You left us right after 3rd grade." Benjamin sighed. "Yes, unfortunately, we can't know where life will take its next turn. I didn't think I would return to my home village one day either. But what amazes me the most is how small the world is. Why am I saying this? You're about to find out. Imagine when I shared my plan with my colleagues, there was a person in my team who also came from these places." The guest glared at Evelyn, but she calmly waited for the rest of the story. John was clearly puzzled by this turn of events. "Benjamin, why are you pulling the cat out of the bag? Just tell it like it is." "I didn't mean to offend you." "We're not offended, but let's get to the point, Benjamin. Who's that goose in your office who can't live without our village?" "I think we know who he is. It's Ethan." The plate slipped out of the hands of the surprised hostess. "Uncle Ethan, does he work for you?" I tell you, it's a small world. After all, the guest had achieved the desired effect and was now enjoying the result. "You see, dear Evelyn, I had a frank conversation with your uncle, during which it became clear that Ethan is very dissatisfied with his grandmother's death warrant. Not only that, but he considers the document invalid and even intends to contest it. Sensing an impending cloud, John intervened in the conversation. But it's impossible. You're wrong, friend. It is possible. After all, it hasn't even been a year since your grandmother died, has it? Or am I wrong, Evelyn? Evelyn felt her mouth go dry. What are you trying to say? My grandmother had her will drawn up and notarized while she was still alive. That's understandable, but you're not a direct heir. But Uncle Ethan refused, and now he's changed his mind. I suggest you reconsider. And remember, I only make a very good offer once and then. Oh, by the way, John, I'm planning to start construction before the fall, so I need reliable people. Can I offer you a job as an old friend? But I'm not a builder. I'm more of an iron worker. That's fine. Will you be foreman or forewoman? Agreed? John stretched out. Well, I'm always ready. Then come over tomorrow. I'm staying at my grandmother's, but it's only temporary. As soon as I get things settled, I'll be back in town. What about construction? That's why I'm looking for reliable people. People who can be trusted with serious business and money. As soon as the door closed behind the guest, John cursed. What a creep, that Uncle Ethan of yours. Evelyn said quietly. I didn't expect him to be so mean either. How much misery has he caused, Mom? He's taking it out on me, too. Evelyn's mother and grandmother had carefully avoided talking about her father when she was very young, and she hadn't been much interested in the matter either. But later she tried several times to find out where her father was and why he lived in another country. Uncle Ethan decided to enlighten her niece, Mother's own brother. One day at a family dinner he said, I think, Camille, it's time to tell the girl. Evelyn remembers well the mother's belittling look at her brother. Ethan, please don't. You know perfectly well that William is not to blame. Then who is? No, sweet sister. He left you with a 1-year-old child to go to your uncle's. He traded you and your daughter for money. Suddenly, the grandmother supported her son. Yes, that's exactly what happened. It's you, Camille, because of your blind love, did not finish the institute and could have made it in the people, if not for the early marriage. A 15-year-old girl was uncomfortable listening to her grandmother and uncle reproach her mom for loving her father so much. Evelyn decided to stand up for her mother. Is love a crime? The grandmother looked at her granddaughter. You're too young to reason. When you have children yourself, you'll know what it's like to raise them. I raised 2 of them on my own, worked 2 jobs, and kept piglets, and all for the sake of educating my children. Thank you that at least Ethan became a man, but Camille didn't appreciate my efforts. She fell in love. She got married in her 3rd year, and soon you were born. Grandma was ready to continue the story, but Mom shouted at her. Please do not fool the child's head. It was your efforts that made me a single mother. It was you, Mom, who then played a comedy with your illness when William came to fetch us. It was you who separated daughter and father. After this, the relatives began to shower at each other with reproaches. Evelyn was disgusted with them and ran away to a friend's house. And soon there was a misfortune with my mother. When she was feeding the pigs, and my grandmother had 8 of them, she was attacked by a wild boar. The woman screamed for a long time, but no one heard her. Only late in the evening, Grandma suddenly realized, Evelyn, where's Camille? I saw her come home from work, and then she disappeared. The girl found her mother unconscious. When the hospital x-rayed her, the doctors were shocked. Poor thing. She had multiple fractures, damaged internal organs. Mom was in the hospital for months. She had one operation after another, but she got weaker and weaker every day. Evelyn ran straight to the hospital after school and sat by her sick mother's bedside for hours. Lessons had to be done late at night. Grandmother visited her daughter only 3 times. I have no time to go to hospitals. If I don't feed them in time, they'll go to waste. And Evelyn, you'd be less likely to go there, just for 5 minutes, and that's enough. I can't do without a helper. One day, Evelyn couldn't stand the injustice. Grandma, aren't you ashamed? Mom is your own daughter, and you treat her as if she were your stepdaughter. But everything is for Uncle Ethan, and those pigs, and the damn boar that trampled on Mama. Everything is for him, too. The shocked Molly could not utter a word, and Evelyn cried and screamed with resentment. I heartily wish that boar would die. The old woman immediately came to her senses and slapped her granddaughter. I wish your tongue was dead. The boar weighs over 10 pounds. That evening, Evelyn did not come home to spend the night. She spent the night sitting next to her mother, whose condition had deteriorated sharply. The woman was falling into a restless sleep, then calling her. In the morning she asked, "Daughter, at home, in my album there are pictures where we are all together, you and me, and your dad. Don't believe it. He's a very good man. It's just that everything's worked out against us. If I get better, you and I will go to my dad. There's his address right to him." 2 days later, Mom died. Evelyn looked for the picture the dying woman had mentioned in the papers, but she couldn't find it. And then she forgot about that picture, because a completely different life began for her. Now all household chores fell on the fragile shoulders of a 16-year-old girl. After school, she would run home to feed the pigs and chickens. Then she had to weed the beds that stretched as far as the horizon. During summer vacations, when school friends and girlfriends went to the sea with their parents or vacationed in health camps, Evelyn did not unbend her back from morning till late in the evening. The list of her duties was enormous, and her grandmother made sure that every item was completed. Twice a year, Uncle Ethan came in from out of town. He would fill the car to the brim with groceries, and without hiding his pleasure, drive back. The hard labor took its toll on the girl's health. She was found to have a herniated spine, and later doctors discovered a problem in the female side. So John was right about one thing. He did spare her from slave labor when he proposed to become his wife. Molly took the news of her granddaughter's marriage in stride. She threw a tantrum. I'm everything to her, and she decided to throw me away. Ungrateful. The future son-in-law listened to these unfair claims and advised Molly to attract his son to hard labor. To the grandmother, this suggestion amounted to an insult, and she shoved John out the door. It was then that Evelyn first disobeyed her old grandmother and left home with her fiancé. At one time, they were staying with her husband's parents, where John's brother John and his family lived. About a year passed, and Molly showed up for a visit. The woman cried for a long time, complained about her fate, and then fell on her knees in front of her granddaughter and began to ask for her forgiveness. "Forgive me, Evelyn. Forgive me for everything. Since you left me, I can't find a place for myself. Please come back. Live with me at my place. I've used up all the livestock. No, I don't have the health to take care of animals." It was unbearable to watch the humiliation of a native person, and the young people returned to Molly's house. Grandmother behaved quietly, tried not to interfere in the family affairs of her granddaughter. She was often ill, and Evelyn did not leave her bedside for 24 hours, just like when her mother was dying. Molly was very homesick, and she was even more worried about Uncle Ethan. "Evelyn, you should call him." "What's wrong? Why isn't he coming? He forgot his mother." The girl dialed her uncle's number many times, but he immediately referred to the lack of time. John sincerely felt sorry for the old woman. He heard these requests, but only Evelyn once in the heart said everything he thought about her uncle. "That's your Uncle Ethan, you bastard. When the old woman was dying, tending the cattle so that he and his children could eat, then he'd show up. And the helpless mother, he has no time to visit her." For 6 years, the son only once visited his mother, but stayed only an hour. Shortly after this visit, Molly and decided to redo the will in favor of her granddaughter. Shortly before her death, she gave her a photograph of her happy parents holding her in their arms. On the back of the photo was an address in English. "It's all my fault, Evelyn. I didn't want Camille to go abroad, and I separated her from William. He was a positive guy, he was already a candidate, and he was invited to work there. And then we came to get you, and I wouldn't let Camille go. But the worst part was that when he called once, I lied and said that Camille had married a good man." Evelyn listened to her grandmother's confession, but her anger was gone. She realized that nothing could be changed and forgave her grandmother. After her death, there was only one close person left in the whole world. Evelyn was afraid that one day he would betray her, but there is a belief that what one fears will happen one day. Just as Benjamin had promised, in August a big construction project was underway in the village. John enthusiastically took up the task assigned to him. From early in the morning until late at night, he was at the site he was entrusted with. With his wife, he rarely shared his work, answering her questions unambiguously. "Everything is normal. The work is going on. The salary drops into the account." But a month passed, then the second, but the promised salary was not brought to the house. He completely forgot about his super project and rarely visited the garage. As it turned out later, Evelyn had no idea what her husband had done with other people's money. It all came out of the blue. One day John came home earlier than usual, his face pale as chalk and his hands shaking. "Evelyn, I need money right away. Lots of money." The woman's heart sank in a premonition of bad things to come. "What's wrong?" That simple question sent her husband into a rage. For the first time in his life, he took a swing at her. "Why do you feign saintly naivete? I thought I told you in plain language that I need money, and it's urgent. Are you my wife or not?" Evelyn was silent. She was shivering, and her hands and feet were ice cold. At last she got over her excitement. "I too, John, asked you in plain language. What's wrong? I have a right to know. You're singing about your rights again. This is all your fault, sending me to work for that ashhole. You don't have enough money. I think you're the one who's been stealing it from me. What should I do this time? Help me. For the last time, let's sell the Dan house while that bastard's offer still stands. Can you explain to me properly why this is so urgent? All right, look. I just got screwed again, and I've decided to temporarily divert some of the money Benjamin gave me for materials to another project. What was it? There was a lucrative venture, and I thought I'd invest in it for a nice dividend. But it didn't work out. I ran into some crooks, and today, as luck would have it, Benjamin demanded all the invoices. That's the story. Evelyn didn't want to hear from the man anymore. She didn't care anymore. All right, if we sell this house, or if Uncle Ethan sues us for it anyway, where do you think you're going to live? That was a question John couldn't answer. Uncle Ethan showed up in the morning. Well, weren't you expecting young people? I see that I've been on your heads like a snowball. But it's a good thing, because you can put all the dots on the inheritance question. Well, I filed a lawsuit to review this case, of course. I hired a good lawyer, so not to spoil the nerves of neither you nor myself. I suggest you move out of your parents' house. After all, anyway, then the bailiffs will put you out, and that the judges will decide the case in my favor. I do not doubt at all. I'm the son and Evelyn is the granddaughter. The law is on my side. And the fact that my mother made a will before she died, she wasn't in her right mind. I've got the certificate. In short, I'll give you 24 hours. Uncle Ethan left. Evelyn began to pack her things. John asked in surprise, "Where are you going?" "Wherever I want to go." "What about me?" "Don't you realize that Benjamin will roll me for money?" At that moment, the door opened wide and the autumn wind blew in. John looked at Benjamin with horror. "Wow, and we were just thinking about you and your wife, just like the proverb says. Think of something and it will appear." The joke turned out to be a bad one, and the next moment, John's body slammed into the opposite wall. Why, Benjamin? You know why. Ignoring Evelyn and John, who was in pain, the guest defiantly set the table in the center of the living room. "Well, are we going to joke again, or are we going to talk seriously?" "I'm talking to both of you. And to you, Evelyn, that goes for you too." "What's it got to do with me? He wasted your money, deal with him." "No, that wasn't the deal." "John, your husband? What's that supposed to mean?" "Because my guys are gonna cut him to ribbons. He's a big hit, but this time he won't make it between construction sites." "I need the money." John made it out of the corner. "Benjamin, honestly, I'll make it up to you. I'll work on your construction site for free for a year." "That's a good point, but it's not you, Ashole, it's your wife. And for you as a punishment, I have picked up another mission, and I don't think you will like it. But there are no other options if you want to live." John began to crawl on his knees in front of Benjamin. It was disgusting to watch this picture of humiliation. And Evelyn grabbed her suitcase, but the guest squeezed her hand, but the woman tried to break free. "Let go, you're hurting me." But Benjamin squeezed the vise even harder. Evelyn screamed, "Madam, it will hurt you even more if I entrust you to my boys. They like to work on women, so you'd better keep your head down." "Well, you're loaning your woman out." "I am, Benjamin. You can have her forever." Evelyn watched her husband tearfully crawl at the feet of his former classmate. She felt no pity for him, only contempt and disdain. Benjamin read all of this in the betrayed woman's gaze. He took her suitcase with one hand and led her to the exit. At the door, Evelyn turned around as if she were saying goodbye to her past life forever. "Come on, you don't want to disturb yourself with such an unpleasant sight." Benjamin pushed the woman lightly toward the exit. The door slammed shut, but outside they could hear John wailing at the top of his voice. "Evelyn, stay. I shall perish without you." The businessman spat contemptuously. "You wretch, it's you who will be doomed if you stay with this man." Forgive me for some inflection, but I'm really ready to tear John apart. He's been such a jerk to me. I don't know how to untie myself now. Benjamin's words sounded quite human, and Evelyn looked at him in surprise. "I don't understand. Do you really want me to be your slave?" "Yes and no." "Come, let's talk. I have a proposition for you. You can refuse, of course, but then I'll ask you to return all the money your husband has squandered. Anyway, he's still your husband, but you'll still take the house, won't you?" Benjamin nodded. "I will, and no one can stop me, as you have already realized. But the only problem is that the money the house is worth won't be enough to pay off the debt. Do you have any idea how much he cut me off? You see, on the one hand, I don't care about anyone who lives here. You're a smart woman, I think you know that, and I don't care about your idiot husband. The fact that I'll give him a chance is a big deal for you." Benjamin stopped in front of his car, opened the door for Evelyn. "You all believe in miracles here in the village. Miracles don't happen." In the city, they would have killed the whole family for that amount of money, and I'm talking to you. He put Evelyn in the car. They drove off. Evelyn felt her heart pounding. I want to tell you right away, Evelyn, if you think about running away, your John will be totally screwed. So a man's life depends on you. Evelyn understood now. So sorry, so sorry. And what should I do? Most importantly, for how long? How long? I haven't counted it yet. It all depends on your work. But what to do now you'll see. They drove to the edge of the village. There was no way to see it from the village, and now Evelyn was numb. It had changed completely in a matter of months. Huge greenhouses stood in rows, apples and pears were planted, and some other trees that were unfamiliar to Evelyn. A large wooden building stood a little to the side. Here, someone should be in charge of all this, not only to work, but also to make others work and to be responsible. Do you understand, Evelyn? Not really. But look, you'll do a good job, and everyone should do a good job, and I'll be there to watch. And if you don't do a good job, the debt won't go down. And if the debt doesn't go down, you'll have to work here for a long time. Only now Evelyn realized what a trap she'd fallen into. And John will work off the debt too, won't he? Benjamin laughed. No, Evelyn, your husband's as useless as a goat's milk. Not only is he an idler, but he's also a thief. So you, and only you, will repay the debt. But that's not fair. Evelyn almost cried. Where have you seen justice in our world, Evelyn? Besides, you heard yourself that your husband gave you to me for debts. I'm going to the police. The woman grasped the doorknob with determination. Of course you will. I've got plenty of testimony about how you and your husband cleaned me out together. Believe me, for that amount of money, you two will go to jail for a long time. You're such scum. Benjamin laughed again. I have to agree with you there. If I wasn't trash, I'd be living, like you and John, in utter poverty and dung. Shall we go? I'll help you carry the suitcase. They came to a wooden building. There was no other word for it, as Evelyn realized she wasn't the first one here. A woman came out to them, looking more like a man. Well, what else did they bring? Is it any good, or is it just as inept as the others? Well, Wendy, that's what you're here for, to keep everyone working like a bee. Wendy laughed. You know I have a fly to collect honey. Benjamin turned around and walked to the car without saying goodbye. Evelyn caught up with him. Don't forget to count the debt, so I know how long I have to work here. I'll do that when I have time. Don't worry, you'll be working here for a long time. Still, I might want to pay you back in money. Benjamin looked at her like she was crazy and went on his way. As it turned out, there were already several unfortunates like Evelyn here. One was working off her husband's debt, who had recklessly wrecked Benjamin's car, and her husband was at home babysitting. They had 2 children. The second had racked up credit, and Benjamin had saved her. She thought he was a kind man and ended up here. In fact, they were all here voluntarily, well, or almost voluntarily, because if any of them left, quit their jobs, the problems would pour in like a cornucopia. Benjamin didn't keep anyone by force. You could go home, you could go home. True, Evelyn didn't have a home. She got out a week later, wanted to show John what her hands had become and spit in his face. But she came out and the house was gone. In place of the house, where her favorite roses had grown, construction was in full swing. Evelyn cried and turned back. Evelyn? She turned around. Standing next to her was Grandma Clara. She used to come to them often when her grandmother was alive. She used to swear at her grandmother, but she didn't take offense. They had been friends for a long time. Hello, Baba Clara. Evelyn sighed. I don't understand something. The house has been sold. There's no one here. I saw John leaving with his suitcases. Why aren't you with him? I'm not with him. I'm working. For Benjamin? They say he doesn't pay at all. He's trying to cheat, or are people lying? She waved her hand and cried, What are you, a girl? Tell me, what happened to you? I haven't seen you in 6 months, and already you've changed so much. Evelyn and Grandma Clara sat down on the grass, and Evelyn told her everything. She knew she couldn't help her, but she felt a little better. The old woman shook her head. I don't know who's the bigger bitch in this situation. You're John or Benjamin? But Benjamin is understandable. He grew up to be a bastard from a young age. But John, I'd kill him. It's all your fault, Evelyn. You should have sent him to work, not let him eat. Where have you seen that? A big forehead sitting on his grandmother's neck. Baba Clara spat and sat and thought, That's it, Evelyn. You should look for your father. Evelyn looked at Clara in amazement. And you know about him. Well, who doesn't know about him? But if you're younger, but William was a good guy. Molly, she's such a bastard. She looks like Benjamin. What's she been doing with this farm all her life? She's got herself a golden coffin or something. She couldn't let Camille go, not out of love, but because someone had to look after her farm. It can't be, Grandmother said. She just didn't want to part with us. Clara waved her hand. You can think what you like, of course, but I knew your grandmother much better than that. Never needed anyone for her but her Ethan. God damn it, every man is a piece of shit. Maybe we're in an abnormal zone here. Clara wondered. Evelyn smiled. Clara's grandmother had always loved everything unusual and otherworldly. Her daughter fought with her as much as she could. Twice they extinguished the house, because Clara lit candles from the evil power and forgot about them. All right, we managed. Once my daughter wanted to heat the stove. The frosts were fierce then. She opened the flap, and instead of a place to put firewood, there was a fresh brickwork. It's good that she didn't have time to grasp it. They broke it, and Clara too. She was making a hole in the world. Grandma was good at everything, but if something got into her head, the old lady never saw Evelyn again. She quickly got up, looked around, and authoritatively declared to herself, That's right, abnormal. We must save the world. She walked briskly into the village. Evelyn sighed. Yes, you'll have a hard time with her. Who knows when she'll get it into her head? When Evelyn returned, the neighbor was lying on her stomach, texting on her laptop. Lisa, listen, is it real, for example, in the same social networks to find a person abroad? Of course it's real. Why do you ask? Did you find a rich relative who is ready to pay for you? Oh, come on. I just wanted to try to find one. So let's try. I've talked to my folks. I've cried, so I'm free. How much longer? 2 months, and then I'm free if I don't get any more fines. Evelyn sighed. By her calculations, she'd be working here for almost a year, and that was if there were no fines, and fines came very quickly. She pulled out a picture, showed it to Lisa, who started typing something quickly. Look, there it is. Evelyn's palms were sweating. There's what? A man with that name. Evelyn, look, he's online. Lisa, don't speak in riddles? Well, he's online now. Come on, what should I write him? Nothing, are you crazy? No, what do you mean you don't text him? You meet him for something. Evelyn remembered John, remembered her home, her whole life, and gave up. At least it's an outlet. Write hello, William. This is Evelyn, Camille's daughter. Lisa chuckled. You're like a letter from the front. Lisa, I'll be quiet, I'll be quiet. Oh, look, I read it. Aye, She hasn't said a word yet. Probably won't answer. Evelyn lay down and was just about to doze off when Lisa pushed her. He did. That's a hell of a thing to say. Well, read it, and I'm going to go have a smoke so I don't get in the way. Evelyn looked at Lisa gratefully and sat down in front of the laptop. She read the words, wiped her tears, reread again. Lisa returned and saw Evelyn all in tears. She sighed. That's what, Mother. The laptop is on your bed, and I need to sleep. I don't want to get it tomorrow. Don't stay up too long. You have to work tomorrow, too. William apologized for not convincing Camille to go against Molly's wishes, for being resentful and not letting on for years. Then work got in the way, one thing and another. When he woke up, he decided he didn't need him anymore. Camille's been married a long time, and the daughter probably calls that man Daddy. Mom had never been married, not even one day. William was silent for a while. Evelyn thought he would never answer again. I had the thought, but then I decided that no matter how cruel Molly was, she wouldn't lie like that. So she did. Do you have a wife, kids? Evelyn, you don't have to tell me. I have no one. I tried to get married. I lasted 6 months twice, but I called my wives, Camille. And then I stopped trying. And God didn't give me children. I mean, He did, but I lost them. But it's not your fault, is it? Another long pause. It's my fault. It's always the man's fault, because he should be stronger, wiser, smarter, you know? It's all my fault. And now I'm dying. I don't have much time left, and I was still afraid to write to you. Dying? Why? There's Evelyn, a disease that doesn't look at places or people. It just goes and takes whoever it wants with it. Of course, Evelyn knew everything. She felt tears running down her cheeks. It was so hurtful, so painful to realize that she had just found her father and wouldn't even get to see him. Evelyn, why don't we video call tomorrow? Oh, I don't know how to do that. If Lisa says it's okay, she'll help you. So that's not you in the picture. No, of course I'll ask her. See you tomorrow. Evelyn has been getting reprimands all day. She got so many fines that Lisa couldn't take it anymore. She was waiting in the greenhouse next to Evelyn. What's wrong with you today? Lisa, you see, that man you found yesterday, he's my father. And Evelyn briefly told her the story of her family. Lisa exhaled. Wow, I'm sorry, your family is a mess. Evelyn, so maybe he's rich? Evelyn stared at her with an uncomprehending stare. Even if he is, which I doubt, so what? So what? He could just pay off that creep, and you'd be free. Oh, Lisa, you say that too. A man dies and I have to ask for money? We've never met. What's the big deal? You're so interesting, you're used by everyone, and you can't. I won't. If you'll let me, we'd like to talk on the video conference today. Oh, you're such an idiot. Tell me, of course. What do you want me to do? As soon as my father saw her, he cried, God, you look just like Camille. How is she? Mom's dead. Dead? And Grandma? She's gone too. They talked for almost an hour. Then they said goodbye. They're putting me in the hospital tomorrow. They won't let me die in peace. And then I'll write to you again. All right, I'll be waiting. When a crying Evelyn returned the laptop, and Lisa asked, So did you tell him about your life? No, why? You should see him, he's so sick. Oh, Evelyn, oh, stupid. Evelyn fell asleep almost immediately. She woke up in the night and saw Lisa sitting on her laptop. She even asked, What's wrong, what? Lisa jumped up. What? No, the kid has a fever. Go back to sleep. I'm going to bed too. And the workday began again. Evelyn learned to ignore the pain in her back, learned not to look at her bloody hands. She just worked and counted the days. What was the use of counting them? 5 would be taken away, 2 added for fines. Benjamin showed up from time to time. He seemed to take a special pleasure in humiliating Evelyn, probably because she was a native of the village where the oligarch himself was born and almost grew up. "Evelyn, you don't look so good." Admittedly, when you lived with your husband, you looked much better. But although it's probably much better to live like behind a stone wall, and he chuckled at his own joke, Evelyn was silent. She wanted to slap his fat face, but she knew she couldn't. A week passed, then another. Every night when Lisa opened her laptop, Evelyn looked at her questioningly, but she just shook her head. Evelyn's father was no longer online. The day came when the disgruntled warden gave Lisa her papers. Everyone came out to see her off. Lisa took Evelyn aside. "I'm sorry. I'm probably the reason your dad hasn't been in touch anymore. But you know, to me, it's better than no father at all." "I don't know what you mean." Evelyn looked at Lisa and really didn't understand anything. Lisa sighed. "The day you talked to him, I texted him back, and I told him all about your story, about your debt, about your husband, about everything. And he said he'd help, and then I guess he changed his mind." "Lisa, why?" Lisa shook her head. "Because, is he a father or not? He's never helped you once in his life, and now he can. You may or may not be offended, but I think I did the right thing." Lisa left and Evelyn returned to her room lost. Now, even if her dad does show up online, she won't know about it. Well, then it's not fate. 7 more months ahead, no time to think and dream at all. Just before Christmas, when the main job was over and the new one was just beginning, Evelyn decided to go to the store. She had nowhere to live, of course, but Christmas is Christmas. Even the warden had gone home for the weekend, though no one could believe she had a family at all. At the store, the clerk crossed her arms when she saw Evelyn. "Evelyn, you?" "I'm Kathy. Why are you looking at me like I'm a ghost?" "Well, Evelyn, no offense, but you've aged 20 years. "I know, Kathy, I know. Why don't you sell it to me quick before somebody else does?" "Yeah, sure." Kathy ran around the store, picking up what Evelyn was showing and talking nonstop. "What, do you work for our tycoon?" "I do, but they say he doesn't pay at all, and the people aren't happy. He evicted people from their homes, not the whole village, but only those who couldn't fight back. And he's ruined everything with his construction." Evelyn grinned. It can't be. Remember how they greeted him, almost throwing their hats in the air? Kathy looked at her. "You shouldn't say that, Evelyn. People really thought the village would be revived, but now it feels like he's a landowner and everyone else is a serf." Evelyn was silent. She knew what serfs were like. "Did you hear yours?" Evelyn was on her way out, but stopped. "Yours is playing in town." "Huh. Well, he lost a lot of money. They say he was beaten up for his debts, even hospitalized. And then our people met him. He said he was getting married. An old woman, but rich." Evelyn laughed. "Oh, John, he wants to ride a crooked mare to heaven." The mood lightened a little. Evelyn took the road she had not taken in a long time, so as not to see an empty place instead of her home. But the place was no longer empty. There was a new house, which was made under the old. She stood for a while and went on her way. She didn't even notice how a figure separated from the house and followed her. "Excuse me, could you please tell me how I can find Evelyn?" She stopped. She didn't know this man, and she'd never seen him before. In fact, he was kind of strange and dressed differently and had a fashionable haircut. "I'm Evelyn. Who are you?" "Oh, for some reason I thought it was you." You look just like your mom." He pulled out the exact same picture she had. My heart sank. "Who are you?" "My name is James. I'm your father's executor." Now Evelyn realized what confused her the most. Was this man pronouncing words too correctly, like a speech therapist or a foreigner? Is there somewhere we can talk, but out of sight? "I take it we don't need eyes on us just yet." "Well, if only on the shore, where the kids go in summer, but now there's no one there." They walked to the river. Evelyn shook the snow off the bench and sat down. "What are you doing? The bench is cold." She smiled. "I can't stand. My back really hurts." She pulled her hand out of the mitten, and the man rounded his eyes when he saw her bruised, haggard hands. "Why are you like this?" Evelyn quickly hid her hands in the mittens. "What did you want to talk to me about?" "Is Papa dead?" "Yes. William passed away 2 months ago, but in the hospital, in the presence of a notary, witnesses, he gave clear orders regarding you. We never got a chance to talk, to sit down." Evelyn wiped away a tear. "What orders?" The man sat down beside her and opened the folder. "The orders are very simple. William instructed me to give you everything he had. I suspect you won't agree to go abroad. He sold everything he had there 2 weeks before he died. All the money, all the assets and more are now yours. I, as his advisor and assistant, will stay with you for the first time. I will help you, so that no one will cheat you, so that you will be able to invest the money profitably. As soon as you understand everything, I will be able to leave you. I'm aware of your problem. The first thing I suggest is that you pay off your debt, which will cause a lot of trouble for the person who dumped it on you. The second thing is to get a good night's rest and a good night's sleep, and only then do business." Evelyn stared at him in amazement. "Money so much that it's enough for a debt?" The man smiled. "Your money is enough to pay 1,000 such debts." He couldn't stand it, he laughed. "You have such a face now." William was a very wealthy man. His work was insanely valued, but he was far from the richest. "So how do I get in touch with this man?" "Through the warden." James's eyebrows flew upwards. "I'm sorry. I must have misheard you." Evelyn laughed now. "Oh, now you should see your face. Let's go down the road and I'll tell you all about it. Tell me, is English your first language?" "Oh, my grandmother." James told her a whole story about how his grandmother had once fled America, but made her children and grandchildren speak only English at home. By the time Evelyn finished her story, they had reached the wooden structure where Wendy stood with her arms at her sides. "What's up, Queen?" "Another fine." Evelyn wanted to start making excuses, as she usually did, but James stepped forward. "I beg your pardon, who are you?" "Who are you?" "I'm Evelyn's attorney. I'd very much like to speak to the man to whom Evelyn allegedly owes money." Wendy, who hadn't even had a chance to change out of her city clothes yet, reached into her pocket for her phone. "I'll call now, of course." "Lawyer." "Well, that's funny. Please tell Mr. Benjamin to grab his lawyer or notary. Only in the presence of 2 persons, we will transfer the debt to him." Wendy already looked at James in amazement and stepped farther away to explain to the owner what was the matter. The girls came out of the outbuilding. They looked at Evelyn with envy. She gave them a hug. "Don't you think I'm not leaving you? James says he will take Benjamin at once, and very soon he will be where he ought to be." The girls sighed, hugged Evelyn, and asked her to come and see them, even if it didn't work out. Benjamin arrived an hour later. In that time, Evelyn and those who worked with her had time to decorate the Christmas tree in the yard. Strangely, Wendy didn't even chase the others away to work. She sat and quietly pondered whether she should run away already or whether she could still work. "Who's so wealthy around here?" James stood up. "Good afternoon. I'm Evelyn's attorney. She'd like to pay you some money. You, in turn, must give a receipt and write that you have no claims against her." "Oh, I can't believe it, Evelyn. Are you a foreigner or something?" "That's right. I was Evelyn's father's attorney and trustee, and now I'm helping Evelyn with what's called an inheritance, and the big inheritance." Benjamin's smile faded a little. He remembered those conversations from his childhood, when adults had said that Evelyn had a father abroad, but no one knew for sure, and it turned out to be true. The inheritance, apparently, is not bad at all, since even from there the man flew. After 2 o'clock, Benjamin, sweating, looked at the departing couple. The man who had come with him said, "Oh, Benjamin, the guy is very competent. He can twist this receipt so that you will not feel bad. If I were you, I'd wrap it up real quick and sit tight." "No way. I was not born to be told what to do by Benjamin." The man shook his head. "Well, that's for you to say. It's my business to warn you. And yes, and I'm sorry, I can't work with you anymore. I don't feel like sitting down for company." He got into his car and drove away quickly. Benjamin turned around and saw the women who worked for him, or rather worked off their debts. "What are you looking at? You can leave, but only temporarily. Whoever wants to can continue working. The salary is twice as much." After 20 minutes, he and Wendy were the only ones left. Wendy took out a travel bag. "You, Benjamin, have calculated me. I'm going too." He looked at her angrily. "Well, you'll get around. You have to work, and you're running away." "Well, I'll get by. I think the journalists in our town would be very interested to hear me." Wendy laughed. She very rarely laughed, and rightly so. Her laughter was like the bleating of a goat. Benjamin threw a wad of money on the table and walked out. James brought Evelyn to the most beautiful hotel in town. "This is your room. Mine is across the hall. You get some rest and sleep, and I'll be there, say 5 o'clock. We'll order dinner, and I'll give you everything. And then we'll figure it out as we go along." Okay. Thank you very much." She didn't get much sleep. She took a bath, dried her hair, thought about buying some cream. Her hands were sore. Her skin chapped from work. Decided that later, tonight, to rest, but she never got to sleep. In the evening, James handed her a card. "This is your card. It's automatic. You can use it to pay for anything you want. Here's the paperwork. It's new. I haven't activated it yet. This is what you need to read. Here's the patent information. You are now the owner of a brand of healing equipment. When you get up to speed, you'll need to renegotiate with some of the companies that manufacture them." Evelyn looked at him with those eyes. "Don't be afraid of anything. You'll figure it all out, and I'll help you. You have very tired eyes. I suggest we split up and go to bed. And tomorrow, you could go to the barber shop. I don't know. What else do women need to be happy? All the business can wait." "Thank you, James. Can I ask you a question?" "Yes, of course. You're here with me, but I suppose you have a family waiting for you at home?" He froze for a second. "No, my family died. My wife and young son were killed in the mountains. I didn't want to live either. If it weren't for your father, we wouldn't be talking right now. Please forgive me." "It's okay. You didn't know. Good night to you." To be honest, Evelyn was even a little tired of having fun. In the morning, while James was probably asleep, she quietly left the room. Through the night, she slept like she was a carefree infant. She waved for a cab. The car immediately stopped in front of her. "Where are we going?" "Do you know where we have expensive, fashionable clothing stores in the city?" The elderly man smiled. "I know everything." 15 minutes later, he stopped at a magician's shop. "He's so handsome." She paid the cab driver and went inside. A woman immediately approached her. "What are you interested in?" Evelyn looked around and answered with a smile. "Everything." The woman raised an eyebrow, immediately snapped her fingers, and two young girls appeared beside her. "Cindy, lingerie, Kelly, dress and suits, and I'll take care of outerwear." To o'clock Evelyn was like being in a fashion show. She tried on so many things. Most she put off to buy. One outfit, a pantsuit paired with a short mink coat, she really liked. The woman who met her suddenly said, "Wait, you can't go outside in those shoes." She quickly dialed someone's number. And already in 10 minutes, Evelyn did not even have time to finish her coffee. A girl with several boxes appeared in the store. "Now we're all set. Do you want your clothes packed? Can you throw them away?" The woman smiled. "With great pleasure. There's a great beauty parlor nearby. The owner is a friend of mine. If you want, I'll call and ask to be taken off the waiting list." "Oh, thank you. I'd love to." The beauty parlor was literally 2 houses down, next to the entrance to the salon where the grocery store entrance was. Evelyn smiled to herself. A year ago, she would have chosen that entrance. John had been stomping outside the store for an hour now. What kind of person was Miranda? She'd gone to get something nice for dinner and had been at the store for an hour. On the one hand, it's good, because I don't have to listen to her stupid jokes and endure her endless touching. On the other hand, I can't leave. Miranda already bought him a car. It may not be the most expensive, but John's never had one. And she promised that if he behaved well, she'd pay off his debt. It wasn't a huge debt, but John had nowhere to get it, and they could beat his head off for it. So he was on his best behavior, trying to do his best. "John, are you there?" He turned around sharply. Oh, how he hated unexpected meetings with acquaintances, because most of them owed him money. "Kathy?" "Hi." It was just the clerk from the village store. "You didn't come to the city from your village, did you?" "Yeah, I did. I need to pick up a few things." "Yeah, there's nothing in the village." Kathy took a look at the car. "I see you bought a car." John grimaced. "Oh, don't. Evelyn works there, and you're so bad." "It's not my fault Benjamin picked it out." Kathy raised an eyebrow in surprise. "I wasn't going to. And Evelyn's not working. She paid that Benjamin, and she's free to go. In fact, her lawyer made such a mess of it that he shut his company down in a flash." "Kathy, are you confused?" "What's her lawyer?" "Where from?" "Oh, you probably don't know anything." Evelyn's father turned up and died, and he lived abroad. He was a millionaire, even more. So now Evelyn is the heiress to the whole fortune. "You're lying." "I didn't think so. The women who worked there told me that her lawyer said she'd put everyone in jail and buy them all." Kathy was pleased with the effect it had. Of course, no Broads had said anything, but let the creep know. Kathy went about her business, and John wondered, what does that mean? His wife is like a cheese and butter, and he has to live with an old woman to get by on a trifle. It's not right. What we need to do is this. We've got to get back to Evelyn. John's mind was already churning with the most fantastic ideas. He turned around and became numb. A cab that had stopped nearby was being driven by a woman. Or rather, it wasn't a woman, it was a queen. Expensive fur coat, hairdo, high-heeled boots. John rubbed his eyes. No, there could be no mistake. It was Evelyn. While he was thinking, the cab drove off, taking his wife with it. "Oh, you weren't lying, Kathy." Before he could think, A shrill voice came from across the street. "John! John, why are you standing there like a statue? Or do you think I'm going to carry the bags myself to feed you?" John jerked and turned around. His Miranda was standing on the front porch of the store. Fat, 15 years older than him, wealthy, as he now realized, very relatively wealthy Miranda. "What are you looking at? Get the bags." John saw how passers-by paid attention to them, how they smiled. He moved towards Miranda, walked over, pulled out his car keys and threw them at her. "Fuck you. Find yourself another asshole." "What? You've got some nerve. You won't get a dime. You can get your ass cut off in the back alley for dead." But John was already striding down the street, thinking how he could find out where Evelyn was. Certainly not in the village. She's got nowhere to live. Oh, I should have asked Kathy more. John had to go to the village. He even had to spend the night at a neighbor's house. But in 3 days he had gathered all the information he needed. The only thing left was to borrow money for flowers. He couldn't go to his wife empty-handed, could he? Evelyn studied the papers. For the past hour, she had been familiarizing herself with the techniques that helped people get back on their feet. It was confusing at first, then interesting, and by the end of the reading, she was sure it was a real miracle. She had even read many testimonials when even those who were considered hopeless started walking. I mean, it's so necessary, but I understand it's all just overseas. Yes, there is something like that here, but only in the capital. Evelyn thought for a moment. James, correct me if I'm wrong, if such a hospital is located in nature, but for example, in our village, it would be more useful, wouldn't it? The man smiled faintly. What can I say? Well done. Immediately grasped the essence, all thought out. Of course, you see, without walks, sunbaths, and all that, the treatment is much longer. It's a pity Benjamin took our village. We have such nature there. You know, Evelyn, you and I are alike after all. I really liked it there too. Everything is so real, so natural, isn't it? And Benjamin, perhaps it's time to take care of him. You know, to free the village from his yoke. Is that possible? Nothing is impossible in this world, especially if you have money. By the way, I've looked at the location of the houses. It would make a great hospital, where the strongest of the world can improve their health. And that's money, and that's a lot of money, and that's jobs. James, if we do it, we'll be the biggest smarties of all. He smiled. After Evelyn had returned from her girls' camping trip, he had not recognized her at first. When he did, he was confused. She couldn't have been that beautiful. When he realized she could have been, he finally died. Now the most important thing was not to show her how he felt about her, because it would turn out that he had come along with the money to the Harris. They discussed some details, and James went to his room. The phone rang. "Evelyn, there's a man here asking for you. He's dying to see you." "Who?" "It's your husband." "My what?" "My husband. I'll be right down. You can't let him in here." She left the room and ran into James. "Evelyn, your face is gone." "What happened?" "Nothing, I'm fine." And she walked briskly toward the elevator. James stood for a moment and followed. What's going on? He's supposed to be guarding her. He immediately recognized the man who tried to hug Evelyn. She pushed his arms away. "John, what do you want? How dare you show your face to me?" "Evelyn, I'm your husband. This is a temporary thing. I've already filed for an annulment." "What annulment? I'll show you." The sound of breaking glass rang in John's head. No, he won't give up his dream. Evelyn is his wife. When he dresses up, he'll look cool too. He won't invent something so simple. He'll invent something worthwhile because they have money. Evelyn, you just don't realize what the future holds. What future? Do you want me to tell you? I don't. And don't even come near me. You're nothing but trouble, John. Learn to live on your own. I don't get it. Are you serious? Yeah, I'm dead serious. John grinned wickedly. You mean you need John to get you out of the mud, but you don't need John to get you out of the money? I repaid you handsomely. In case you haven't forgotten, I've been working off your debt. You gave me away just like a thing so that I could earn money for your entertainment. John couldn't take it anymore. You shouldn't have done that. I was getting ready. I bought flowers. Who needs you like that? You can't even have children. You're an inferior. Evelyn looked at him. If anyone in this life is incomplete, it's you. John didn't realize how it happened. It was just so painful to realize that nothing would change, that he would not be able to live a beautiful and rich life. And he already had so many images in his head. He hit Evelyn and swung again. All the hurt and pain was in his fist. John wanted to cry, and she was to blame for everything. It didn't work the second time. Some man kicked him so hard that John bent down and gulped for a long time. Hotel staff rushed to them, and someone called the police. 2 weeks later, Evelyn and James arrived in the village. Benjamin had been taken into custody by people who were competent in the matter. He was in more trouble than you could count. Nancy had not left the house at all. Benjamin owed wages to the whole village. Evelyn knew perfectly well that she had to talk to the people. Rumors were circulating, but people didn't know what was what, and that was why they were so gloomy. The village people, who had always preferred stability and dimensionality, were very frightened when a large crowd gathered near their car. Evelyn spoke up. The only thing left was to borrow money for flowers. He couldn't go to his wife empty-handed, could he? Evelyn studied the papers. For the past hour, she had been familiarizing herself with the techniques that helped people get back on their feet. It was confusing at first, then interesting, and by the end of the reading, she was sure it was a real miracle. She had even read many testimonials when even those who were considered hopeless started walking. I mean, it's so necessary, but I understand it's all just overseas. Yes, there is something like that here, but only in the capital. Evelyn thought for a moment. James, correct me if I'm wrong, if such a hospital is located in nature, but, for example, in our village, it would be more useful, wouldn't it? The man smiled faintly. What can I say? Well done. Immediately grasped the essence, all thought out. Of course. You see, without walks, sunbaths, and all that, the treatment is much longer. It's a pity Benjamin took our village. We have such nature there. You know, Evelyn, you and I are alike after all. I really liked it there too. Everything is so real, so natural, isn't it? And Benjamin, perhaps it's time to take care of him. You know, to free the village from his yoke. Is that possible? Nothing is impossible in this world, especially if you have money. By the way, I looked at the location of the houses. It would make a great hospital, where the strongest of the world can improve their health. And that's money, and that's a lot of money, and that's jobs. James, if we do it, we'll be the biggest smarties of all. He smiled. After Evelyn had returned from her girls' camping trip, he had not recognized her at first. When he did, he was confused. She couldn't have been that beautiful. When he realized she could have been, he finally died. Now, the most important thing was not to show her how he felt about her, because it would turn out that he had come along with the money to the heiress. They discussed some details, and James went to his room. The phone rang. Evelyn, there's a man here asking for you. He's dying to see you. Who? It's your husband. My what? My husband. I'll be right down. You can't let him in here. She left the room and ran into James. "Evelyn, your face is gone." "What happened?" "Nothing, I'm fine." And she walked briskly toward the elevator. James stood for a moment and followed. What's going on? He's supposed to be guarding her. He immediately recognized the man who tried to hug Evelyn. She pushed his arms away. "John, what do you want? How dare you show your face to me?" "Evelyn, I'm your husband. This is a temporary thing. I've already filed for an annulment." "What annulment? I'll show you." The sound of breaking glass rang in John's head. No, he won't give up his dream. Evelyn is his wife. When he dresses up, he'll look cool too. He won't invent something so simple. He'll invent something worthwhile because they have money. "Evelyn, you just don't realize what the future holds." "What future?" "Do you want me to tell you?" "I don't. And don't even come near me. You're nothing but trouble, John. Learn to live on your own." "I don't get it. Are you serious?" "Yeah, I'm dead serious." John grinned wickedly. "You mean you need John to get you out of the mud, but you don't need John to get you out of the money? I repaid you handsomely. In case you haven't forgotten, I've been working off your debt. You gave me away just like a thing so that I could earn money for your entertainment." John couldn't take it anymore. "You shouldn't have done that. I was getting ready. I bought flowers. Who needs you like that? You can't even have children. You're an inferior." Evelyn looked at him. "If anyone in this life is incomplete, it's you." John didn't realize how it happened. It was just so painful to realize that nothing would change, that he would not be able to live a beautiful and rich life. And he already had so many images in his head. He hit Evelyn and swung again. All the hurt and pain was in his fist. John wanted to cry, and she was to blame for everything. It didn't work the second time. Some man kicked him so hard that John bent down and gulped for a long time. Hotel staff rushed to them, and someone called the police. 2 weeks later, Evelyn and James arrived in the village. Benjamin had been taken into custody by people who were competent in the matter. He was in more trouble than you could count. Nancy had not left the house at all. Benjamin owed wages to the whole village. Evelyn knew perfectly well that she had to talk to the people. Rumors were circulating, but people didn't know what was what, and that was why they were so gloomy. The village people, who had always preferred stability and dimensionality, were very frightened when a large crowd gathered near their car. Evelyn spoke up. "You all have known me since I was a little girl. I've never slacked off, never did a bad thing. And most importantly, I loved our village. I'll answer the most important questions right away. Yes, I received an inheritance. Yes, I bought back from Benjamin everything he had bought here." The crowd erupted in amazement. "Wow, so now you're going to put up a factory too?" Evelyn smiled. "No, I wanted to consult with you." The people waited tensely. She handed out little books to everyone about the technique for the sick and told them at the same time, "We can save all the nature, make a name for ourselves, make a lot of jobs. If you all say no, nothing will happen. I promise you." There was no arguing. Grandfather Mason, who was the oldest in the village, came out to the people and said, "I think we can trust Evelyn. If it's true, our village will be famous all over the world. When we got back to town, we decided that we should celebrate the beginning of a successful business." James was a little too gloomy. "What's the matter with you? You don't seem happy about our success." "Of course I am. Except I realized one thing today. You don't need me anymore. You can do this on your own. I can leave." When we got back, I booked a ticket, leaving in the morning. Evelyn realized it was bound to happen sooner or later. But why now? Why not later someday? She could see she liked him. She couldn't let him go. James? Yes. James, could you reschedule the flight? Reschedule? Do you still need me here? Yes, I do. He shrugged. Well, he would suffer for her a little longer. It was unbearable to be around the person he was about to lose. All right, what time do you want to reschedule the flight? He picked up the phone. In the next flight. In this one, I'm not letting you go. James slowly raised his eyes to her, looked at her for a long time, then said, And I don't want you to think I stayed for the money. I don't, but everyone will think so. Do you care what everyone else thinks? James smiled. Evelyn, you're just scared. You don't love me, do you? Do you? And then he blushed. And I do, but... Then I'll drop everything and come with you. In a second, Evelyn was in James's arms. He kissed her and repeated, I've had one desire lately, to kiss you. Now for the rest of your life you'll have to put up with me around you. And I agree. Evelyn laughed happily.
Subscribe and click the bell.
She's so uncomplicated. Ethan smiled, and his smile was surprisingly gentle and dreamy. Who? John wondered. They were in a nightclub, but the loud music didn't stop them from talking. Separate rooms with excellent noise insulation were provided for solvent clients. The guys were not just solvent clients, but also regular and very generous with tips. Therefore, this small but very cozy office with panoramic windows and a mirror ceiling was, you could say, assigned to them. So who's the uncomplicated one? Ethan snapped out of his dreamy reverie and for some reason whispered, Slaga, she is such a... Listen, I honestly haven't met anyone like her. Her father owns a tire shop, a businessman, a hard worker, and the girl is not spoiled by life at all. I asked her where she likes to vacation. So she told me, you know what she said? You won't believe it. She says that at the cottage father says fishing, and they then from this fish caught, food cooked, fry it, and with boiled potatoes eat and soup still. Liar. John stared at me. You're a fool. She's playing a joke on you, and you believe it. What kind of girl would have fun like that, as if she's already retired? That's ridiculous. No, wait, I see what's going on. Where's their summer house? Did you ask? Maybe in Cyprus, maybe. No. It's just a little tree, 40 miles out of town, inherited from my grandparents. And that's where he and his daddy have their place of power. They go fishing, pick mushrooms, berries. Listen, she can make jam, and she dries mushrooms and pickles them. What a great girl! She says she starts her mornings with exercise and douses herself with cold water to avoid getting sick. No, but have you ever seen such girls? Not in the movies, but for real. Everybody else has a fitness center and a personal trainer and a healthy diet, and she's exercising in cold water. Aha! And fried fish and chips, plus jam. You're looking for exotic, aren't you? John asked me glumly. I don't even want to ask where you found it, but I'll advise you as a friend. Get rid of her before it's too late. You don't know these country girls, and they're clutching, she'll grab you and that's it. You won't realize how married you'll be, and then you won't get divorced. She'll grab everything she can reach, and you'll be left without pants. Oh, come on, don't make me sad. Ethan grinned. You haven't seen her, Clara. She's like a Cinderella, friendly, kind, and good at everything. Her eyes are like this, and all the time she seems to be surprised. I'll order her a coffee and a cake, and she'll have a happy look on her face. At the Moody's, take her hand in the dark, and she is already shining all over. And when I kissed her for the first time, I think she then even the whole night could not sleep. Knave. She's so cute and sweet, you could fall in love with her. Did you fall in love? No. Ethan wrinkled his nose and looked like a hedgehog about to sneeze, but then changed his mind. What kind of love? I've been with so many girls, I don't think I'm capable of falling in love anymore. You remember Thumbelina, don't you? I got bored beforehand. That's 100% me. And the girl? What about the girl? Well, beautiful but funny, but you'll meet another, even prettier, even funnier. If you fall in love with every girl, you won't have enough days in your life. John suddenly winked conspiratorially at his buddy. Listen, doesn't she have a girlfriend? Because you tell me so deliciously, I even thought I might be missing something in life. Jam, for example. You look for it. Ethan said arrogantly and burst out laughing. Come on, don't be so slow. Go to any cheaper club. There are 100 of them per square meter. And all hungry, you'll treat them to a cocktail and take them to your place. John remained silent, and Ethan suddenly felt sickened by his own cynicism. Ethan had been living in a sticky jam for a month now. It had started out so nice, so funny. Clara, in her colored sundresses, with her long hair and perpetually surprised look, her willingness to admire everything he said, to rejoice at any, even the cheapest gift. Ethan sometimes bought the girl the cheapest chocolates on purpose, just to test her reaction, but she was as happy about them as if she'd been given diamonds. She was so sweetly embarrassed and always asked him to turn off the lights. Every day she wished him a good morning. Yes, everything was so light, funny, plush, like a video clip of a couple in love releasing into the sky, balloons, hearts, and then, holding hands, going to an ice cream parlor. And then it happened, and I had to thrash around, twist and turn, come up with original moves, lie, lie, lie. Lying was the most painful of all. Ethan was more and more confused, with no idea how to get out of the horror that had come over him and pinned him to the ground. The horror looked exactly like the two purple stripes, parallel to each other, on a pregnancy test. It was the test that the idiotic Clara had presented to him by calling and scheduling an urgent appointment. Come right now, please, she asked. I have such news. In short, come. What's wrong? He asked, surprised. Have the aliens taken over the planet? Ethan, this is not a phone call. Come quickly. It's very important. I'm waiting for you. The girl didn't bother to explain. Ethan was very worried then. The demand, the urgency. It was something out of Clara's repertoire if she said it was urgent. Intuition, of course, was not dormant. Ethan suddenly remembered how, a couple weeks ago, he and Clara had decided to go out of town to a wild beach and had had a wonderful time there until late in the evening. They didn't even want to leave, and she fell in love with the place and kept repeating, I will live here. I like it here so much that I want to stay here forever. Ethan understood her, he wanted to, but he wanted it to be like this. Warm but not hot weather, the water glistening, and for Clara to walk around in her bathing suit, and for them to be as old as they are today, 18 and 19. He would build a shawl then, right here on top of the hill, and in the evenings they would burn fires and drink cheap sweet wine. A picture to remember. He said out loud, What is it? I want to say that I will remember this day and keep it in detail, like a photograph of you and me living here all our lives and not growing old for a minute. It's like a snapshot, only not with a camera, just with your eyes. He kept in his memory this picture of eternal summer and eternal happiness. However, there were no pharmacies nearby, but Ethan somehow hoped that it would be lucky. And if he hoped in vain, oh, not for good. all this urgency? Oh, not good. What if the wild beach left them a mark in the form off? What the hell is this? Maybe Clara just saw a cockroach and now he's afraid to move, or a mouse. He didn't notice how he accelerated his steps towards the girl's house. Whatever happened there, it was better to find out as soon as possible and not to be tormented by doubts. And maybe it would turn out that there was nothing to worry about. Maybe the girl just needs some help. You know, like move a couch. A couch would be nice. He ran up the stairs to find out, finally, what was the cause of Clara's anxiety. Here is already her floor. Ethan didn't even have time to ring the doorbell. But Slaga jumped out into the entryway in a bathrobe, clutching in her fist a strip of paper with 2 dashes on it. Ethan tried hard not to think about where the test had been before it was picked up. Look, look! The girl shrieked, smiling so contentedly that Ethan immediately wanted to run away. Of course, Clara, with her usual stupidity, didn't notice anything and kept shoving the object of her idiotic pride under his nose. Well, what to do now? I wonder what kind of reaction she expects. That he, too, would jump with delight, pick her up in his arms and start twirling her around? Or fall to his knees and start kissing her still flat belly like in the movies? Yeah, a bad movie. Ethan, what's wrong with you? Is that your face? You're not happy. She finally figured it out. I should be happy. But are you happy? It's our baby, yours and mine. Isn't it great? Yours is. Ethan blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. But as for me, that's a moot point. He knew he was saying a nasty, insulting thing. He knew that Clara didn't deserve them, but he was saying them, and now, at this very moment, he wanted them to be true. How do I know? Maybe I wasn't your only one. You didn't swear fidelity to me, did you? Maybe you were seeing someone else at the same time. I wouldn't be surprised at all. How? How? Why? Because. Do you have proof that you didn't go out with someone else, that you only went out with me? No? Well, I don't have any proof either. So why should I believe you? The girl's huge eyes instantly filled with tears. Ethan, look, there's 2 stripes, that means. I know what it means without you telling me. It's okay, it happens. But what does that have to do with me? Who else? Ethan, what's wrong with you? I'm not with anyone else. Here's a test, check it out. Don't give me that test. I've seen it. I'm not interested in what it says, Ethan. He asked, squeamishly pulling away. Well, where? Show me. Clara slammed her eyes shut resentfully. A crystal tear ran down her rounded cheek, her eyes large, open, amber-colored. At first, they seemed childishly enthusiastic and naive. Where had it all gone? It was as if the enchantment had dissipated in an instant, leaving only the surprise of his own blindness. Where was he looking before? Naivety, delight. Now he realized it was not enthusiasm, but elementary stupidity. Too bad it was too late for him. I had no one else. The girl whispered in a trembling voice. You know you haven't. How would I know that? Ethan started up. Do you think I've been following you? I mean, who else could have been involved? I'm just saying. You go to the doctor for an abortion. If there's anything there, you have to pay. Fine, I'll pay. But then we break up because I don't want to do it again. Especially from a girl I've never been sure of. You'll get pregnant again, and then you'll want to pin it on me? No way. To the doctor, there was a voice from behind the door. She's going to register, to observe the pregnancy. Who the hell is that? The boy was confused. The door of the apartment opened, and Ethan saw a man in old sweatpants on the doorstep. Apparently, This character was the future grandfather of the two stripes and the daddy of the dopey, blissful one. In addition to the pants, the man was dressed in a shedding t-shirt, which favorably emphasized his emerging potbelly. His vast baldness was a strange contrast to his thick dark mustache. His gaze was ferocious, a real monster. "Good evening, young man." The monster said hello politely and without any transition, grabbed Ethan by the shirt on his chest and pulled him closer. "It's going to kill him." The boy thought and squeezed his eyes shut just in case. "Definitely will. My name is Christopher." The monster growled, breathing in the guy's face. His breath smelled of fish and something else alcoholic. Beer, probably. "Ethan," the boy wheezed. The shirt on his chest pulled taut and rattled threateningly. "Nice to meet you," continued the monster who called himself Christopher, continuing the conversation. "As you may have already guessed, I am Clara's father. Before you say anything in your defense, I feel it is my duty to inform you that I will not tolerate rudeness." This almost refined politeness, combined with the creepy paw rubbing his shirt and the horrifying face in close proximity to Ethan's face, had a paralyzing effect. The guy didn't dare open his eyes, and he didn't even think about trying to break free. "If you hurt her, you hurt me, and it's dangerous to hurt me," growled the monster. "And now a second warning. You will marry my daughter, because my grandson must be born in a legal marriage. Maybe you have not yet had time to propose marriage, Clara, as befits a decent man. Well, now is the time to do it now. That's what you were going to do, like a real man, not a trashy little bastard, right? Am I right? Am I right?" With each new phrase, the monster shook the guy vigorously. "You're right. Yes, yes, of course. That's a smart boy." Christopher, unclasping at last his mighty hand, carefully smoothed Ethan's shirt and patting him paternally on the cheek. "Because if you had been a shameless scoundrel, capable of abandoning a pregnant woman, I would have made a cutlet of you and fed you to my dog. And now I dare not disturb you anymore." The monster smiled and disappeared behind the door. Ethan slid along the wall and sat down on the floor. "Is your father crazy?" he asked. "Or does he always act like that? Or only with guests?" The girl glanced at the door and pressed her finger to her lips. "Speak quietly." "Daddy's hearing is phenomenal. He can hear everything through 3 doors. You'd better be quiet. We're getting married then." Ethan mumbled and covered his face with his hands. It's a nightmare. It was impossible to believe what was happening. The next day, Christopher personally drove the couple to the marriage ceremony and made sure that the applications were written in the proper form and accepted as they should be. At the same time, he kept glancing at Ethan as if he expected the groom to run away or act crazy. "Clara said you're not a poor guy." He said it after the applications were filed. "Of course, it's good to have something to live on while my wife is at home with the baby." "Well, how are you doing? What do you do for a living?" "Where?" "Nothing," mumbled the guy. "Work is bad now. They pay me a trifle everywhere." Christopher nodded. "That's true. But no one ever got rich on a paycheck like that. You should try to organize something yourself." "All right, it's solvable. But what do you live on?" "My parents give me a little. They've got." "Well, I see. I see. Don't go on." The future father-in-law waved away. "Well, Clara?" He looked at his daughter. "Congratulations. You found yourself a lazy man with an ego and a slacker. And this daughter," Christopher unceremoniously pointed his finger at Ethan. "This one, look closely, is your future husband. What do you think of that?" Well, the girl lowered her eyes. "Things are different now, aren't they?" Right, Ethan. He's a family man now. I think he'll be able to work and provide for me and the baby. You think so? Dad grinned. Well, think. It's my business, but if you want to know what I think, I'll tell you this. This Major doesn't like to work and doesn't know how to work. If he could do something, he wouldn't be on his parents' back. And if he didn't know how to do something, but he loved it, he'd be trying to learn something. But that was before, Daddy, and now. He doesn't love you either. Christopher went on. And his father is, I apologize, like a pig, a snow-white swan. Come on, Dad. Shut up. You asked for my opinion, so stay out of my way. And here's my advice to you, my daughter. Send him away. Right after the baby's born, he's no use to you and won't be. This way you'll have a child in marriage, and you'll get rid of the stone around your neck. Girl, you're beautiful, you're smart. You'll find yourself a nice guy with a head and a heart. And this one, he glanced contemptuously at Ethan. He'll never be a man again. He's all right on the face, handsome, but there's nothing good about him except his face. The face changes with time. Ethan gritted his teeth. He's in trouble. Now this car mechanic with 3 grades of education is going to sit there and insult him. Dad, don't, asked Clara, pointing her eyes at the groom. It's unpleasant for him. And in general, of course, you have a lot of life experience, but maybe you're wrong. But it's unlikely. Can I, said Ethan, who up to this moment had been gloomily silent, stop insulting me. I'm your daughter's fiancé and the father of your grandson. Who gave you the right to behave like this? Hiya, nobody yet. If you want to prove your worth, get a job. Think about a place to live. And by the way, start taking care of your fiancé. She's pregnant. She needs rest, proper nutrition, light emotions. The doctor said Clara needs fruit and vitamins. Go and think about it and get her that. For starters, the next day, Ethan was walking through the yard of his fiancé's house and could not answer himself the question, what was he doing here? A heavy bag of fruit and vitamins for Clara was weighing down his arm. Humanitarian aid for pregnant fools and very heavy. Christopher opened the door for him himself and held out his hand for the bag. Did you bring fruit? Good for you, come on. Clara is not at home now. I sent her to the cottage in the morning. Let her get some fresh air. She'll be back on Thursday. I'll tell her you came by. Ethan was not invited to come in, and he remained standing, staring dumbfoundedly at the cheap sodden door. Why am I here? Again he asked himself, but there was no definite answer to that question. Most likely because not to come to leave Clara, no matter how stupid she was, would be to agree with the characterization that this disgusting type, her father, had given him. And also because he was scared. This really Christopher, a man without a tower, such a man will unscrew his head and then surrender to the authorities, but only unscrewed, it is no longer screwed back in place. Screw it all and skip town right now. And then what? Daddy has long ago and quite unambiguously made it clear to his children that either after receiving a certificate of higher education, they stay to work at his company, or they cannot count on the inheritance and at least some financial support. This means that to run away is like agreeing to a miserable existence, to be lost on the streets, and to fend for themselves. Ethan shakes his head, as if he hoped to shake her out of her fears and any other unnecessary thoughts. I had to think of some way out of this, and as soon as possible. But, as it turned out, no reasonable ideas appeared, and it was clear that he could not do without his sister's advice. Clara stood at the window, watching Ethan nervously pacing the sidewalk in front of the house, probably thinking about something and certainly nervous. He sent you some fruit. My father shouted from the room. I left it on the table in the kitchen. And why did you deceive him that I'm at the cottage? Asked the girl. I heard. Christopher stood on the threshold of the room, leaned his shoulder against the jamb, and looked intently, very seriously at his daughter. I wanted to buy you some time, he said, for you to think calmly whether you want him or not. You see what he's like. He's neither fish nor flesh. A slug. Then why did you ask him to marry you? I pressured him, of course. I couldn't listen to him go on and on about you. But tell me something. Do you really want to marry him, that lazy bum? A child without a husband isn't very nice, but if you look at it another way, maybe it's better to have no husband than that dry fruit of yours. I love him, I confessed. You love him, of course. It's understandable. While you were dating, hugging, kissing, all was well with you, but it's the same for everyone until there are no responsibilities, no children. He's a handsome guy, looking in love, holding your hand, talking nicely. Love, carrots, all those beautiful things. And how did things get complicated? So where did it go, his love? I heard everything. He didn't tell you, Clara. Even though we didn't plan it, we'll get through it and I'll be with you, no matter what you decide, did he? He didn't, did he? No. He started talking about how the baby might not be his and other nasty stuff that made me want to throw up. And I'm not squeamish. I was. So let me ask you a different question. Will you have something to love him for when the passion passes? And it will pass. Can you believe me? There will remain the character of a man, his deeds, for what you can respect. You can despise, you can love, and you can hate. Will there be something to love him for then? Clara lowered her head and bit her lip. Daddy, she said after a short silence. I don't know now. Ethan was the prince from the TV series. Tall, slender, dark-eyed in his movements, the lightness of a predator, and the fluidity of water flowing from one position to another as naturally, easily, beautifully as if a river were flowing. And his speech was like a river, as smooth, unhurried, and sometimes like a noisy stream. Clara thought he must smell of water. Fresh, clean, fresh from the spring, but it was the opposite. When she hugged Ethan, she could always smell the woods, resin and herbs and something else, but it was so intoxicating that it seemed impossible to break the embrace. To stand like this, pressed together, and breathe in the smell of my beloved. Inhale it and do not stop, do not get distracted. You're a river, and it smells like a real forest. She used to say, why a river? I don't know. They say I'm a river, but I'm not. But you didn't. You're like a river. You've come into my life and filled it all with you. So you're a river? No, I'm just yours. How many of these conversations have they had? How many unbreakable embraces? How can you forget that now? And now Ethan was nothing like his recent self. Where did he get all this insolence, meanness, anger? The way he kept saying he didn't know if she'd been faithful to him or if she'd gone out with others, as if she could look at others. She didn't notice anyone but him. Clara still loved him, but realized more and more clearly she loved her memories of Ethan and the real him she didn't know at all. She doesn't want to know. I don't want to be a daddy. I don't want to be a daddy. Ethan kept repeating himself. With each word, he banged his head against the soft back of the chair. Nancy was quietly looking at her fresh manicure and didn't seem to notice what was happening. She was silently worrying about when her brother would finally calm down enough to talk to her. Ethan groaned for a few more minutes, then lifted his head. Why don't you say something? He asked in a perfectly normal voice. Don't you see your brother's life is a disaster? You could have said something, consoled him, given him some advice. Nancy shrugged her shoulders. Ethan, you're a fool. Aphoristically, she said. It's pretty clear, he said. What do we do now? That gastropub has a crazy daddy. He'll kill me, and he won't regret it. You. Is that how you talk about the girl you love? I never loved her. Ethan moaned. She's cute, she's pretty, and I got carried away for a while. But what kind of love? You have to pay for pleasure. Nancy said admonishingly. As for everything else, however, for stupidity, for ignorance, for beauty and talent. But pleasure usually costs more than anything else. Thank you for the informative lecture. The brother bowed. But what should I do, huh? So I don't have to go back to it. The sister began slowly, looking up at the ceiling. I warned you that your games in bad neighborhoods to the suburbs and affairs in bedroom communities will not lead to good. But since you didn't listen to me, and you, she pointed her finger at her brother. You didn't. Now we need to find out what options we have to solve the problem. The first option is to offer the girl money for an abortion and make sure she gets proper care and maintenance. Dad, tell her that horror, spontaneous miscarriage, but you will cope. You can overcome this grief together, supporting each other. You don't know that fool, Clara. Ethan said glumly. There's no way she's going to go along with this. People like her have only one goal in this life, to have a bunch of children like a pig and sit among them contentedly while a man works for her and all this litter. So this option is out. Nancy stated nonchalantly. Let's move on to the second option. It's simpler, but also more complicated. Say it. Leave everything as it is and raise the child together. Wow. One option is better than the other. Do you have any other interesting ideas? A third option. I haven't thought of a third one yet. Maybe I should just drop off the radar. Sorely suggested the guy. Why? It's quite possible. Just change your phone number, leave, and that's it. There'd be no place for us to cross paths with her then. He grinned. We'll be on different paths. And her dad's a crazy tire man. He won't be able to find me. Nancy shook her head. No, my dear brother, that won't do. I won't say the platitudes about the fact that if you do, you'll lose your father's financial support in no time. That's half the trouble, if you ask me. Money can be earned. The trouble is, you're incapable of taking care of yourself. And do you know why? And why is that? Asked my brother. Because the created problems need to be solved, and you just want to merge quietly, disappear. Yes, almost all men do that. Ethan was indignant. You'd think. And that's why they almost all live as they have to. The girl said, they work for miserable wages, live in shanty towns, and in the evenings drink the cheap liquor they're sold under the guise of beer. That's pretty much all of yours. You want to be like that. What's that got to do with it? It's got everything to do with it. Nancy sighed. That it's not those who run away from problems who live well, but those who aren't afraid to face them. Those who solve them. You have a problem, and you want to run away from it. In that case, how long after you get your inheritance will you be on the street? If, of course, you get it at all, and not crawl back under your parents' wing after you've been fired for stupidity from your supermarket cashier position? Inheritance. Ethan grumbled. What's there to talk about now? Dad's health is good. That's fine. It seems to be as far away from the inheritance as the moon. But it'll come sooner or later. And frankly, I wouldn't want you to give up your share and then settle down to support me, said the sister. There was so much cold certainty in her tone that Ethan felt uneasy. Nancy was, unlike her brother, the pride of the family, a strategist's mindset, independence, the ability to make quick decisions and put them into action, and a persistence so persistent that God forbid she should dream of it. A robot, not a woman. Ethan joked, but deep down he admired his sister. That's why he ran to her for advice whenever he had the slightest difficulty. Usually she managed, thinking quickly, assessing the situation correctly, and giving excellent advice. But today, it seemed that even Nancy could not give him any advice, but she spurred his own imagination. "You're a good girl, sister," he said and clapped his hands together. "I think I've figured out what to do." The beer was disgustingly diluted. Ethan forced himself to swallow what was already in his mouth, but he set the mug aside. The bulky man sitting across from him was also his future father-in-law. He looked at the guy with bewilderment. "Do not like it?" he asked. "You'll have to excuse me, Christopher," replied Ethan. "You know, I'm not very good with beer." But I couldn't explain to this fat and aging man that beer was at least something you could try at Oktoberfest before it became too popular. Well, or at least in the Czech Republic. And what you can buy for pennies at the supermarket is not beer. It's rat poison. Suit yourself. He smiled. But I like to drink beer in the evening at work. You know, you get tired, so here it is. He lifted the bottle. Relaxes me, relieves stress, and puts me in a positive frame of mind. Ethan nodded politely. That's what my father says. Christopher immediately seized on the mention. He's a good man, your father, a hard worker. By the way, it's about time we got to know each other. What do you think? Because look, you and Clara are about to get married. You'll soon become parents, and we haven't even seen the matchmakers yet. It's not right. Yes? Ethan mumbled uncertainly. But, you know, we have such a family, such a... Well, family is family. The man interrupted him. Whatever they are, they're our own. You just bring them to us, and we'll make friends. Ethan was silent. You're in trouble, you idiot. You're in trouble. He should have listened to his sister, because she'd always told him to socialize with people in his own circle. And she was right on the money, you bastard. Well, what? The son of an entrepreneur. For a minute, a man with 2 higher education, who for fun is studying a 5th foreign language, may have in common with the daughter of the owner some lousy tire shop. He's just a common bastard anyway, and his daughter is the same, even if she is beautiful. Fool! Ethan berated himself for the umpteenth time this evening. If you want a taste of tart exoticism, you can have it. You know he lied, following a momentary burst of inspiration. I don't want you to meet my parents because I'm embarrassed, because they're, well, how should I put it, unusual people. Do they drink? Christopher raised his eyebrows. So, yeah, sure, it's a scary thing. But you can talk to them. If they want to quit, so I will organize treatment. I have a brother in New York just from addiction. He's a great doctor. He's got a whole clinic. Sure, yeah, I'll have to talk to them about it. Maybe they'll agree. That would be very good. It'll be fine, Ethan, as long as they want to live sober. The boy's got his head down. I'd like to postpone your acquaintance after all, especially since Clara's pregnant. Why should she go to all this trouble? She doesn't. But will they even come to the wedding? I guess they said they'd try, but they didn't make any firm promises. So we'll meet them in a week. Christopher shouted contentedly and took another big sip of his disgusting beer. The wedding was bearing down on Ethan at the speed of sound, but now he was looking forward to it. Each new day brought the lad closer to the coveted day, the release. The plan he had devised was simple and brilliantly thought out. They, that is, both Clara and her crazy father should be disappointed in me. He informed his sister. They should realize that it's better to be a single mother than to be married to a jerk like me. With tireless energy, he invented new ways to convince the bride, especially the future father-in-law, of his repulsive nature. "When do you think you'll get a job?" Christopher snapped at him. "Your bride is not an elephant. 2 years pregnant will not walk. But I'm looking for something." Ethan turned around. "I haven't found anything yet." "All right, you'll come to my tire shop. I'll teach you everything myself. I'll pay you well. If you work well, you'll start earning well." This conversation was repeated with depressing regularity, and in the end, Ethan saw a suitable occasion to demonstrate once again his unsuitability for family life. The only thing left to do was to summon up the courage. "I don't want to work." Bluntly, he declared one day to Clara and Christopher. "Why should I? My parents still give me money, and as soon as the child is born, I will also get an allowance from the state." How much did Clara find out? But no matter how much it is, it's still money. "And when the baby grows up?" asked the girl anxiously, looking at the groom. "The allowance will end, and the older the child, the more money is needed for him. The allowance will run out, but Clara, the parents won't," Ethan assured her. "And when it ends and but so then there will be an inheritance, and not a small one. By the way, I've already decided what we'll spend it on. We'll buy a big house and rent it out. It's for passive income. You do nothing and the money drips. It's beautiful. And you and I will go to Thailand. Life is very cheap there. We'll have enough rent money for 2 people. "Why 2? What about the baby? Or don't you plan to take him with you?" "Oh, Clara," Ethan said reproachfully, "you can't just think of yourself. Where do you want to take the baby? To Thailand?" "No, you can't even ask me that. Of course, you shouldn't take the child with you. Because of the climate change, insects, kindergarten, school, medicine. In short, we'll leave him here. Let Grandma and Grandpa take care of him, and we'll go there to rest. We can come and visit once in a while." "But wait, Ethan." "Why?" Christopher stepped in. "I think it's a great plan. We can implement it. At least I'll make a man out of my grandson. Daddy will not teach him anything good. Right, Clara? You're starting again." Offended, Ethan said, and was silent for a long time. "That's how you try to offend me, to humiliate me." "And for what?" "Because I want to arrange everything so that Clara and the child would be happy. It's better to separate mother and child." Ethan was silent, but in his heart he felt that he had just won a small but important victory. Let them continue to think that he was a foolish, worthless, twitchy idiot from whom nothing could be expected. The next day he showed up at his fiancée's house drunk and diligently made noise in the entryway, until Christopher peeked out of the apartment and threatened to call the police. "Oh, come on, Dad." Ethan swung the bottle in a cartoonish fashion. Some of the wine spilled over his head and ran down his face. Ethan wiped away the alcohol and licked his palms. Christopher looked at him in disgust, which was exactly what the groom's script called for. "Oh," he said, smiling stupidly. "Can I call you Dad? Dad? Dad is just right. It's you." "Go home," Christopher advised him. "Go before I turn you in to the police." "So how do you go home?" Ethan was indignant. "I'm here to see my sweetheart." "Yes, Clara, yes, my little darling." Come here, come here." He pinched his bride's cheek. "I can't do anything without my Clara. I can't do anything without her, Daddy. I can't eat, I can't sleep, and I can't see you," said Christopher. "Get out, and don't you dare breathe your booze on my daughter. You'll come back when you're sober." Having waited a few more days after the drinking performance, Ethan again came to the guests and demanded a wedding present from his future father-in-law. So you don't have to worry about what to guess. You know how they give us all kinds of awful junk, and then people agonize, they don't know where to put these gifts. So let's make a wish list, like some people do. Do what? Well, wish list means wish list. The guests will familiarize themselves with it, and then everyone will decide what to give from this list, and there are only the necessary things. I think you'll give us an apartment, he said, but I'm telling you right away, we need a 2-room apartment, a child. And what will your parents give? Christopher grinned. Maybe a summer house? You put it on your wish list. The child will need fresh air and vitamins. By the way, I've already looked at a nice cottage near the city. All communications are already pulled up, sewerage, water, electricity. There is near a pine forest, very clean air, and there is a garden, so we won't have to grow apples ourselves. Daddy? Clara laughed, but Ethan stopped her with a gesture. My parents will support us, he said habitually, adding a note of resentment to his voice. Isn't that enough for you? Christopher sighed and shook his head. Unfortunately, yes. If they had raised you to be a man, I'd be much more grateful, honestly. Clara, he turned to his daughter. Why do you need such a husband? Maybe you'll change your mind while there's still time. Daddy, the girl was confused. You wanted to have a child in marriage, didn't you? I did. Dad didn't disagree. But look at him, that father. Then such a father, maybe it's better. Clara, Ethan raised his head in offense. Do you see what's going on here? Your father wants to separate us. Are you just going to keep quiet? Let the child grow up without a father? Because you see, Christopher, you don't like me, do you? Clara smiled and waved her hands. Honestly, Ethan, it seems to me that you yourself want us to break up. I just don't understand why you won't say it openly. Because your crazy dad would cut me to ribbons. Ethan thought, but he only said one thing out loud. Don't be silly, the wedding's in a week. His sister was skeptical of Ethan's plan. It was her nature to be skeptical, she said, and she was probably right. But Ethan still believed in his own strength. Just a little more to go, just another week. They're already at their limit, barely hanging on. Just a little more patience, and the wedding day's in a week. My sister reminded me. Exactly. Ethan exclaimed happily. Exactly. That's just about the day of the wedding. And that's when I'm going to have my main gig, after which, oh, Nancy, I'm going to have such a party to celebrate my release. We'll go to the Canaries. We'll get some people together, rent a beach and party from morning till night till the ambulances come for us. Sister only gave me a sharp shoulder. Let's see if your idea doesn't fail, she snorted. Don't say gop until you've jumped over it. I've already jumped over, my dear sister. I have. Ethan laughed and hugged Nancy tightly. Clara was pensively going through the countless ruffles on her wedding dress, the dress itself hanging on its hinges on the closet door. Christopher looked into his daughter's room and sat down beside her. It's beautiful, he said, looking at the wedding dress. The ribbons, the lace. I never understood these wedding dresses. After all, for one day it is, and the wedding is off and in the closet. But beautiful. Yes, beautiful. Clara let go of the caressing fabric from her fingers and turned to her father. This is not what I dreamed of, Dad. Not at all. And now I'm looking at this dress and thinking, who am I going to wear it for? Ethan? The man felt that now the girl was ready to tell him something important, special, and kept silent, afraid to scare her mood. You know, when I met Ethan, she said slowly, I felt like I'd met some kind of fairy prince, and not just because he was handsome. He took such good care of me, drove me to school, picked me up after class, fed me at restaurants. Then we went out, went to the movies. Every day? Dad asked. Every day. And it seemed to me that it was like going to the movies. And nothing about it made you suspicious. I did. It was only a couple of weeks later that I suddenly thought, doesn't he have any business of his own? I mean, we were together all the time. From morning till night. It's like he's got no school, no job, nothing but fun. I asked him, and he looked at me so strangely and said, I can afford to rest. But here he is all resting and resting. Father snorted. And does not get bored. Yes, and when I found out I was pregnant, I thought that now everything would change for sure. Ethan will realize that now he can't go out like he used to, thinking only about pleasures. That a child will be here soon, and that's a responsibility. You have to think about the future. But the further I go, the more I realize that he's not going to think about anything. You see the way he acts, it's like he's getting cocky on purpose. Christopher didn't know what to say. And what can you say? Clara saw and said it all herself. You can still replay everything, he said softly. Just tell that bum there's no wedding. It's my fault, too. When I found out about it, I was furious. I thought I'd do anything, and the child would be born in marriage, and then the grass would grow back. But you know how they treated it in my time. It was considered a disgrace. That's what I thought out of habit, and then I looked around and everything had changed. What's the point? Now many women give birth to children, but they're in no hurry to get married. What can you do if you're not lucky enough to have a father? We'll raise the kid, work, bring him up. You'll meet a good guy. And this one, what's he worth to you? He's a fool. If only I'd realized who he was before. Sadly, smiled Clara. And now I feel like I have to go all the way. And I keep thinking, well, at least he said that there will be no wedding, even if he refused to marry. Why wait for him to say that? My father was surprised. Can you do it yourself or not? But do you want to? I'll tell him, and I'll throw him down the stairs with my great pleasure, eh? The wedding is the day after tomorrow, Dad, reminded my daughter. Everything is ready, money spent, invitations, restaurant. How can I cancel it all? How then to look people in the eyes? Give it up. Christopher laughed. Who cares? Changed her mind and that's it. If you don't like it, the door's over there. No, you can't do that. Can you marry a jerk? I made a mistake. What can I do? So I'll have to go all the way, said the daughter. And the father realized that no matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't change her mind. She feels sorry for her. She doesn't want to marry that Ethan of hers. She's embarrassed in front of others, but in front of herself, in front of her child. Ethan was getting ready for the wedding. He'd been shopping all day, but he hadn't found anything suitable. What kind of discrimination is this? Why aren't there stores for people who like tattered clothes? What do fashion designers care about? Are they creating some kind of fashion collection? One uglier, one uglier. And where, you may ask, are the fashion collections for the homeless, where in the end, you can get at least a homeless man's masquerade costume? Shopping had worn him out. Ethan was about to fall into despair, but then a brilliant idea struck him. Why look for special clothes? You could just make your own. A pity, of course, but what not to sacrifice for a great cause? All it takes is a little dirt. That's it. Ethan flew home on wings. Once home, he got down to business with all the imagination he could muster. First, he wet the soles of his sneakers with water and carefully walked in them over his sweater and jeans, which he spread out on the floor. The prints were quite convincing, But they weren't the only thing he could do. He found some pistachio ice cream in the fridge and smeared it on his jeans and sweater. Then Ethan poured some instant coffee into a jar and poured it on his sweater. His jeans got a few ketchup stains and a couple of greasy butter stains. Only the finishing touches remained. Ethan, armed with a pair of scissors, carefully cut the sweater along the seam and ripped off the sleeve. Then he stretched the sweater in all directions to add bagginess and was satisfied with his creation. The elegant summer sweater was now unrecognizable. The jeans were a different story. Despite the ketchup, ice cream, and butter, the stupid pants still didn't look bad enough. Ethan stomped around in his sneakers just in case, cut off the back pocket, leaving it dangling on a couple of verses, and in addition, poured a glass of water on one pant leg and poured instant coffee right on the wet spot, then began laboriously rubbing the rich coffee powder right into the fabric. It would be more expressive that way. It really did fix things. Now the pants looked just right. They looked like they'd been pulled out of a dumpster. Ethan marveled aloud, taking another critical look at his clothes. His wedding outfit was ready. Clara sat in the kitchen, melancholy, stirring the sugar in her cup. The wedding dress hung in its former place. The girl had glanced at it without interest in the morning and passed it by. "You're not dressed yet," surprised Christopher. He saw that his daughter was sitting in her pajamas, her hair gathered in a shaggy bundle, and did not even try to look at the clock. He himself had already managed to wake up, eat breakfast, and take a shower. Now he only had to get dressed and could go to marry his daughter. But only the daughter was not in a hurry. Soon the groom will come, and you are unwashed, sitting in your pajamas. How can you do that? What's the matter with you, Clara? Don't you feel well? I don't want to get married, Papa, she said, without any expression. I don't. To Ethan, no, you shouldn't marry a man like that. I only realized last night you can't. It would be a tragedy. It'd be misery, and I've got a baby to think about. Dad, can we still call it off? Isn't it too late? But you found time to change your mind. The father smiled and patted the girl's hair. Right on the day of the wedding. Well, better late than never. Your fool is coming, and you'll tell him. Or do you want me to tell him? No, Dad, don't. I'll tell him myself. I'll decide. I'll tell him myself. Clara finally looked up at her father with a tired look. I haven't slept all night. He understood. Look at the circles under your eyes. Oh, youth, youth? Don't worry, my child, he said quietly. You've made the right decision. Ethan looked at himself in the mirror again with pleasure. Perfect. He had thought of everything, or almost everything. No, the watch had to come off. He smeared a little olive oil on his hair to make it stick together, then sprinkled it with flour. It was perfectly messy and even somewhat dusty, and the stubble on his face, which he hadn't gotten rid of in 2 days, had grown back sloppily. It remained to pay attention to his nails. The question of manicure was solved very simply. Ethan went outside and sat down on the nearest lawn, digging into the ground for a while. His sneakers, which he had also covered with earth, looked a little more civilized than necessary, and the guy got rid of the laces. Now everything was perfect. It was time to go after the bride. Just before Clara's house, Ethan stopped and took a few deep breaths and exhaled. And so the final act of the play Escape from Family Life began. An important key moment in his plan. Now it is necessary to play. Well, play brightly and even, probably brilliantly. Otherwise tonight he'll find himself a married man. The door was opened for him by Clara herself. Ethan? What's the matter with you? Clara. He'd howled and fell to his knees. Clara, I'm so bad, I'm worse. Clara, at least beat me. Will it make me feel better? Beat me, beat me. Ethan, calm down. What's this masquerade? She's pregnant, she can't fight. Do you want me to beat you up? Suggested Christopher, who heard Ethan's cries. Clara, get away. Let me get that slacker. But Dad, the girl was angry. You've got time for jokes. The man is so happy. Without much sympathy, said Christopher. Maybe he should call an ambulance? Clara, howled Ethan. Clara, my darling girl, my favorite. How are we going to live with you now? Daddy's broke. They took everything from us for debts, every last cent. There's no money, no real estate. They took away all the shares. We have nothing left. How are we going to live now? How can I marry you now? My beauty, my Clara. My darling, my darling, my darling. Don't be silent. Tell me something, please. Oh, the girl sighed. Thank God, honestly. What? Ethan stopped howling in surprise and raised his head. Clara, we can't get married now, can we? That's a good thing, she said sincerely. I'm sorry, Ethan. It's probably my own fault for not saying it sooner. But you realize that. What kind of family are you? You don't want it. Neither do I. What about your dad going broke? Of course he is, but maybe it's not that bad. I'm sure he's not that broke or anything. Don't you want to marry me? Ethan interrupted her. Well, yes, I don't. And it's a good thing we realized it before we got married. You don't want to marry me, he repeated, shocked. Clara sighed. I don't. I'm sorry. Ethan rose to his feet and looked at the girl resentfully. So I've been freaking out that now we can't get married. And you? Fuck you. Have a nice stay. Ethan rushed down the stairs and thought that this was it. He was running towards his long-awaited freedom, but for some reason he wasn't happy about it. Good girl, said Christopher. Well done, but don't take offense at him. It's just a slip of the tongue. Don't feel bad, baby. You did the right thing. And Ethan jumped out into the street. Without slowing down, ran away from this house, away from Clara, away from her father, away from her child. From this whole nightmare story, for which he was ashamed and for some reason also very offended. As if he had just been betrayed by his most trusted friend. Only now, when everything was behind him, he wanted to ask himself, what was so bad about marrying this sweet, loving girl? And would it have been so terrible to become a father? But it was both painful and pointless to think about it now. He had thought for too long that he was being trapped, lured like an animal into a trap, and he had been ready to do anything to break free. And now he wasn't needed, and it turned out that no one was trying to catch him. And the trap was not a trap. It's he himself made up a hell of a lot of things. But what about it now? What's the point? He ran along the asphalt path, and it seemed that this run could go on, if not forever, then for many, many millennia. Ethan never tired and never wanted to stop, ever. Maybe one day he would collapse from fatigue somewhere in Cambodia, but that would be later, when he was exhausted. Only then, and not before. But this time life decided everything for him. A persistent phone call made him stop. What? Ethan bellowed into the receiver. It was Nancy. Her sister, which was absolutely unbelievable, was sobbing at the top of her voice. What are you crying about? I can't understand a word you're saying. Ethan, come at once. Dad was in an accident. He wasn't saved. Can you hear me? Where is he now? Is he in the hospital? Is he in surgery right now? Do you need anything? How about blood? We're the same type. Ethan, Nancy screamed. "Dad's dead. He's dead, you know." "You're lying," whispered Ethan. "You're lying, aren't you, Nancy?" "I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't believe you." He shouted so loudly that an elderly woman with a dog on a leash, passing by, flinched and stepped away. "I don't believe you." Ethan shouted, "I don't believe it. You're lying." "Nancy, I don't believe you." But he did. Nancy wouldn't joke like that. He knew it. "I'm on my way to the lineup," said the sister through her tears. "You come too." "I can't on my own." "Come, I'm waiting for you, Ethan." "Will you come?" "I'll come," he whispered. I'll come right now. The rest of it went on like an endlessly sad movie, and everything Ethan remembered was somehow very vague. No matter how hard Ethan tried, he couldn't remember how he'd gotten a cab and gotten to Nancy. He only remembered calling his sister from the car and trying to find out where he was going and where she was waiting for him. And Nancy was sobbing, mixing up addresses, couldn't remember anything. Then she handed the phone to someone and the address was found. Ethan found her almost unconscious, sedated. He had to identify his father's body. Ethan had heard that morgues could be cold, but for some reason he felt neither cold nor warm or anything. His father lay covered with a sheet, and when Ethan looked at his face, he saw almost no damage. That pleased him for some reason. Why? He couldn't remember that either. Maybe he just didn't want his father's face to be disfigured. The funeral, another moment of reverence, lingered in his memory. Ethan only remembered that his sister, despite her grief, had been able to pull herself together fairly quickly and had looked solemnly calm at the funeral, standing at his father's coffin. Ethan was not calm, and he was not calm either. He couldn't make himself feel anything, nothing at all, as if all his emotions had been numbed or taken away at once. He kept watching his father's coffin being lowered into the ground, and only one question kept him in suspense. Why? Why did his father need money? Why had he worked so hard to earn it? Why? Why did he hardly ever leave work? Why did he work like a slave in the galleys? What was it all for if it was all over in an instant? Only now Ethan realized that he had always thought that money could protect him from something. I guess it could, but all the money in the world couldn't stop a truck from going into the oncoming lane. Well, that's just how it is. Ethan couldn't get that thought out of his head. And then, sitting next to his sister at the reading of the will, it all became so unimportant. The money, the share in the business, the stock. What did it matter now? He thought about whether his father had time to look up at the sky. How often did he go out with friends? How many times have he sat on the ocean and watched the fiery, tropical sun sink in? Had he ever even seen the ocean? Or had he never had time to go on vacation? Somehow, that was all that began to matter. Nothing else. Hey, he looked up. "Nancy, did you say something?" "I couldn't hear." "You know, it doesn't matter, though." "Nancy." Ethan put his hand on his sister's shoulder. "I want to give up my share of the inheritance in your favor." "What?" She was confused. "What are you saying?" "Dad made a will for both of us, and you're saying you want to give up everything." "Why? Of the two of us." He smiled. "You're the one who's always smarter, more responsible. You're determined, strong. You won't let the cause to which our father devoted his whole life go to the wind. And that's why I want you to have it all. It's only fair and just. You should give it to someone who can hold it together and grow it. Not a schmuck like me. I'd really spend it all in a year and end up with nothing. That'd be okay, but I feel sorry for my dad. He put his whole life into this. There's just one thing I'd like to ask you." It's about Clara. I'm not gonna say anything in front of strangers right now. I'll text you, okay? Nancy covered her eyes for a second, then wiped away a tear with her handkerchief. What about you? She asked quietly. What are you going to do? Ethan? He shrugged. Me, I'll watch the sky, the sunsets. I'm leaving, sis. There's nothing more for me to do in this town. He squeezed the girl's shoulder lightly and walked out into the street. The whole world was waiting for him now. For a brief moment, Ethan wanted to go over to Clara's house to say goodbye to her, but he shouldn't have. He managed to realize something about himself. His father lived for work, and he, Ethan, could stay here and live for the child, but he shouldn't do that. There was nothing he could do. Everything in their family, the truest of naturals, fans. Dad and Nancy are work fans, and Ethan, he's a fan of freedom. And that's probably better than being a fan of parenting. It's bound to break the kid. No, better to watch the sunset. He went to the ticket counter and asked for a one-way ticket. Where to? They asked him. Anywhere. Wait for me, though. Anywhere to the ocean, and preferably south. Ethan stepped off the airplane straight into paradise. At least this place looked a lot like it. Tall palm trees waved in the wind, their huge leaves wreathed in opahalas. A wonderful fragrance of flowers wafted in the air. In the distance, but still close, the ocean offered its waters to the sun. The speech of the passers-by was more like the chirping of birds in the morning spring. No luggage, sir? Someone addressed him in passable English. I don't need it. Ethan smiled. The joy, the fullness of life, made him want to sing. Never before in his life had he felt so free. He had a little money. Enough to eat twice at any of the local cafes. And beyond that, he was too lazy to think about it. Tomorrow seemed so far away. There would be a day, there would be food. He went forward, not choosing the road. All paths here would sooner or later lead to the ocean. Nancy had no difficulty in finding Clara's address. She had arrived there in the morning to be sure to find her brother's ex-fiancé at home. She looked at her guest with a noticeably rounded belly, a little plump and surprised. So it is you, Ethan's sister? She asked at last. How odd that you don't look like him at all. Unfortunately, you're right, Clara. Nancy smiled. Not in appearance, not in character, not in content. But that's not why I came here. I know my brother well, Clara, and I know that Ethan is, well, to put it mildly, not the most responsible person in the world. That's just the way he is, despite his many virtues. But I'm not a stranger to his child, and I'm his own aunt. And if you don't mind. Oh, so you want to see the baby? She was delighted. Well, of course, whenever you want. What are we talking about? I would like not only to see, but also to take care of my nephew. Nancy corrected the girl. To take over, so to speak, fatherly duties. Oh, come on, really. No, please, listen to me, because it concerns the baby and his future. First of all, you, Clara, will receive a certain amount of money every month for the baby. Don't argue. Ethan, and you may not know this, has renounced his part of the inheritance in my favor. So I've decided that I'm going to dispose of it this way, with part of the money going to child support and the rest for your baby to inherit afterward. Well, in short, when his time comes to receive the inheritance, and until then I will try to see to it that the share of my nephew did not depreciate, but on the contrary, became more. I hope you won't object and argue with me. No. It is obvious to me, for example, that this is the right and just decision. You won't challenge it, will you? No, I know you wouldn't. Nancy, I just wasn't ready. I understand everything you could tell me, that you're not in need, that your father will help you. But I still think it's justice. Don't deny me the chance to right my brother's wrong. I beg you very much. 8 months in the tropics will get to anyone. Ethan knew that now. Personal experience is nothing to be trifled with. Don't confuse tourism with emigration. Tourists fly in for a week's vacation, decide they're in paradise. Here, the sun is always shining and the ocean breaks its waves on the shore, and over the shore carried snow-white seagulls. For some reason, he realized now that it was time to go home. He had a sudden urge to see his sister, to see how she was doing, and to visit Clara. The baby must have been born by now, though Ethan had stopped counting the months long ago. He just lived, not caring about the numbers on the calendar or the days of the week. Sometimes hired for a paltry wage to load bananas for export. Sometimes for a bowl of food, he agreed to wash dishes in local eateries. Sometimes begging. Once even had an affair with a pretty mulatto. But alas, the passion quickly faded because they could not explain themselves to each other. Miracle Girl chattered in some unknown language and did not understand a word of English. But still their love passion allowed Ethan to live without hunger for several weeks. His beauty was a great cook, and there was always food in the house. That marvelous little girl worked in a cafe as a cook. There was a brief period in this strange life of his, full of coincidence, when Ethan got involved with a local gang, and for a while he robbed them and ran away from the police. Though, to be honest, he hadn't had to run away very often. The police here had an easy time turning a blind eye to a lot of things. If, of course, to offer the officers of the law a small cash reward, in general, it was very understandable. There were far more petty thugs than policemen in this banana paradise, and everyone wanted to live in peace. Strangely enough, Ethan liked it. At first, it even seemed that he would not part with his new friends and would eventually become the new Pablo Escobar. He was prophesied to have a great future. At first, it rounded his head and encouraged him. But then Ethan somehow got bored of it all at once. Who does not know, he may think that the life of any romantic from the big road can be anything dangerous, luxurious, frightening, saturated. But Ethan has personally experienced that even in such a profession, there is enough of its routine. One day he just left, quietly, without saying goodbye or throwing a party. His associates probably thought he'd been hit by a bullet in one of the endless street shootouts. It was a common occurrence. No one was looking for Ethan. And now he was standing on the shore, thinking that spring was probably in full swing back home, and for the first time in a long, endless time, he wanted to walk the familiar streets and hear his native speech. Yes, it was time to go back. He said to himself, "It's definitely time now." If he got a job loading bananas again, he could save up for a ticket in a month. Clara was cradling her tiny son and softly singing a lullaby to him. Christopher looked into his daughter's room and looked at two of the dearest and most beloved people in the world, Clara and baby No. Nothing is more precious than this. He thought, for the umpteenth time there isn't, and there won't be. Life, ongoing, endless from father to daughter, from daughter to grandchild. Clara caught her father's gaze and smiled. He had already fallen asleep. She said in a whisper. Christopher gently took the child in his arms and moved him to the crib. "Do not regret it?" he asked. "For what?" The daughter did not understand. He did not know what to answer. Probably about everything at once. About having a baby. About Ethan not working out. "Nonsense, Dad. Why should I regret it? I had such a wonderful son. And Ethan, what the hell with him? Besides, Father has noticed that you seem to have a new boyfriend. Well, you think I didn't notice the way that Doctor looked at you? I even came to see you off in person when you were discharged. You can't be fooled. Clara laughed. He's kind of looking after me, and I like him a lot too. Although, of course, it's too early to talk about something serious. What's the hurry? There's no hurry. Christopher agreed. Noah rumbled softly in the crib. Clara came over, but her father gestured for her to stop. It's all right, I'll do it. He rocked the crib quietly and sang a lullaby to his grandson. Clara looked at her father and her heart warmed. The eternal circle of life from parents to children, from children to grandchildren. And nothing is more important than that nothing. Ethan. Nancy shouted when she saw her brother on the doorstep. He was terribly overgrown, dirty, and dressed in some strange rags. A veritable shambles. But it was her brother. She couldn't help but recognize him. How I've missed you, little sister, how you've become. Nancy had clearly crossed the threshold between angular girl and young beautiful woman in a matter of months. She had put on a little weight, but it suited her remarkably well. Her cheeks, shoulders, and breasts had plumped up. Her movements had become fluid, and she had dyed her hair a couple of shades darker, just enough to accentuate her fair skin and emphasize her eyes. How beautiful you've become. Ethan said sincerely, and you? I've been going places no decent person should go. I'll tell you about it someday, or even write a book. Later, his sister interrupted him. Tell me the most important thing. Did you come back for good? I mean back to a normal human life. You see, I need someone I can trust. No, Nancy, I'm sorry. He even put his hands out in front of him, like he wanted to protect himself from his sister's words. I can't. I wanted to see you. Just to be home. It's been a while, but you can't ask for more than that. I wish I could help you, but it's not my thing. Constancy, business, home, I'll only make things worse. I'll run away at the worst possible moment. Then what? But maybe you could at least think about it. Nancy suggested it. It's not like I'm suggesting you chain yourself to the office. We could find you something remotely, even something as simple as that, for starters. And then before you know it, you'll be up to your neck in business. He stopped his sister gently. It's not for everyone. Sis, people like you like it, but it doesn't suit me at all. No offense to me, but suit yourself. Nancy lowered her head with a sigh. I'm sorry, of course, but I suppose it's true. Everyone should do his own thing, what his soul is drawn to. You've grown up, sister. Ethan grinned. So have you? She answered him in the same tone. You haven't changed either. Have you been to see Clara? She's married, but I'm still doing what you asked me to do. She gets good alimony, and when your son gets older. Thank you, Nancy. Ethan meant what he said. He didn't come in. You don't need to bring anything up. She's doing well, and I'm glad of it. She's a wonderful person, very kind and sincere. Everyone would be happy to have such a wife. But not you. My sister smiled sadly. I am not suitable for Constancy. When it catches up with me, I get mad and start doing such a wild thing that I am ashamed of myself. Why should I ruin a good woman's life? Let alone my own child. Does she have a good husband? Yes, a very good husband. He's so protective of her and the baby. They're very happy, both Clara and Noah. I think in a couple of years they'll give Noah a brother or sister. Well, that's good. Ethan smiled. And now I'm going to go. It was good to see you. Bye. Will you at least spend the night? My brother smiled nonchalantly. I'm not used to sleeping indoors unless the weather's really bad, and then I get nervous. But today it's warm. It felt good to be out on the city streets at night. Not that Ethan was looking for trouble, but somehow he was lucky. Or maybe it was just that it was peaceful at home compared to the tropical paradise. He'd never once run into a mugger, never had to deal with hooligans looking for someone to beat up. You could say the city at night was favorable to him. The streets were bright with streetlights, storefronts, and car headlights. He liked to sit on a bench and look at the road, cars passing by, everything like in life. Everyone goes his own way, and someone will get to the goal safely, and someone because of daredevillery will get into an accident, but will get off only a fright. And some, I didn't want to think about them. Ethan had become a surprisingly friendly man. I guess his life as a homeless man, his new life, had something to do with it. While he was rich, few people treated him kindly, only his colleagues in the racket, and those were gone as soon as he was a pauper. But now he was helped not to die by strangers, whom he knew had only enough. But kind grandmothers' traders sometimes treated him with apples from their stalls. The cook at the street kiosk once took a long look at Ethan squatting on the curb with his alms bowl, then beckoned him over and gave him a huge, freshly cooked shawarma. And that man in the entryway, who wouldn't let the scandalized neighbors kick out in the rain, a vagrant. These are such rays of kindness in a cruel world. You look at it, and you become kinder yourself. And even his seemingly bitchy sister. How happy she was to see his brother. How she persuaded him to stay and return to civilized life, to settle down. But she didn't succeed. Ethan had become too attached to freedom. And freedom he now understood as the complete absence of attachments to addresses, cities, people. Ethan would be howling with longing in a week if he were to go back to his old self. And no money was worth it, no money ever. Today he found a good spot right across the street from the restaurant. People come out of there nice because they're full, and if they're drunk, the catch could be great. True, they were often chased away from fish places, but if you don't worry and try to be inconspicuous, you might get lucky. Without any nostalgia, he looked at the huge, brightly lighted windows and polished steps at the entrance. Was it really only a year ago that he himself had been in places like this every day? Waiters in uniform with polite smiles now seemed to him creatures from another world, and not so long ago he considered them idlers, unworthy of any attention, servants. How are things changing? A few more coins fell into his coin bowl. Ethan raised his head. "Thank you, Ethan." The young woman who had just dropped the change into his piggy bank squatted down and looked straight into the tramp's face. Ethan instinctively pulled back, hiding deeper into his hood. His hair had grown long enough to cover his face, along with his beard. He wouldn't recognize him. He wouldn't even recognize himself now. He couldn't see his old self, no matter how hard he tried. But she did, didn't she? "Ethan? Is that you, Ethan?" Clara kept repeating his name, but he didn't want to respond to it. He hadn't been Ethan for a long time, at least not the Ethan she knew. "You're wrong, girl," he said hoarsely. "That's not my name." "I'm sorry." Clara straightened up and took out a few bills from her purse. "Here you go, please. And sorry again. I thought you reminded me of someone I know." "I'm sorry." He nodded without raising his head. "Clara," someone called out to her. Ethan squinted his eyes. A young man was standing beside a brand new car, opening the doors for his beloved. "I'm coming," she smiled. Her heels clicked on the pavement. The smell of perfume wafted away. She had gone far away, and there was no need to catch up with her. Ethan took some paper money from his piggy bank and hid it under his sweatshirt. Thank you, Clara. Tonight he would have food and maybe even a little beer. What more could a free man dream of?